Yes, a bit of silence would be wonderful. Anyway, great. Thank you all very much for making it back after this morning for what will be, I hope, will be a fascinating afternoon. For our third session, Professor Will Blake from the University of Plymouth is our chair. We have an abundance of people who enjoy soil. And this is unfortunate, really, because most of us could talk for soil for hours, but we wanted to diversify the range of subjects that we're talking about. So Will Blake, who's actually Professor of Catchment Science, is actually doing terrific work on soil carbon. It's for the purposes of this session, an expert chair, a geographer, and a consumer. And I'm really, really pleased to have Will here, but then I'll hand over to him for the third session. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Harry. Yeah, I think we had a really nice link into this session, which is thinking differently, routes to market. A really nice link was left with us at the end of the previous session, where I think Peter brought up the issue of a fair price. And I think that's something we really need to get to grips with today. And I've noticed, certainly in my work, thinking about the challenges, a lot of the challenges we've heard about today that the agri-sector faces. Quite often in my world, the first thing that comes up is environmental sustainability. But when I speak to farmers and we talk about the context of the work and the challenges we're trying to solve together, it's financial sustainability has to be the principal concern and business resilience. And so trying to find that balance between the environmental sustainability and the financial sustainability is a really important issue for us to get to grips with. And I think there's a piece of work, thinking about myself as a consumer, as Harry introduced me just now, there is a piece of work that needs to be done to really raise awareness in, I guess, the consumer world, in the policy world, about that, the importance of that balance, and certainly from an agri-sector point of view, the fact that financial sustainability has to be first and foremost, because without that, the businesses can't survive and thrive, and they can't deliver the environmental sustainability that we all want through our different lenses. So I guess there's been some recent debate, and there's been sort of the awareness has been raised through the work of Guy Watson recently. He was, as I'm sure you're aware, up at Parliament campaigning for fair price for farmers, with particularly thinking through the supermarket lens. But of course, there's more than one way to do that, and that's something that we're going to hear about today from our speakers, different ways of engaging with consumers, particularly thinking about short and more transparent supply chains. So I guess the questions we're really trying to get to grips with here are there less costly routes to get produce to market? And where are the opportunities to diversify there, whilst also satisfying other demands like the environmental sustainability? So trying to marry those two things together, I think, is something we're going to hear about through different lenses from our speakers. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our speakers today. They've all got different perspectives, different experiences of alternative routes to market. And really, they're all experts collectively in the chain on the other side of the farm gate, and particularly that relationship between food and farming. So we're sort of moving away from the environmental into this area, but of course the two remain intertwined, as I think we're going to find out from our speakers. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what they've got to say, thinking about how they've transformed their businesses and how that might reflect on things and ambitions in the room as well. So we've got a decent amount of time to hear from each speaker. We'll then sit at the table and have a bit of discussion amongst the group, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. So we've got until 3 o'clock, don't we? So we've got plenty of time to tackle this issue. So we'll hear from each speaker in turn. First up, we'll have Abby Allen from Piper's Farm, followed by Andy Gray from Farm Wilder, and then Bertie Matthews from Matthews Cotswold Flour. So over to you, Abby, to take the stage.
Short person in the room. I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone for coming out, because you guys are all super busy people, and to come and share this day together and to talk about something so important is a huge thing. And I also just want to say what an amazing group of people, the knowledge in this room, the kind of inspiration, the passion and the enthusiasm for moving farming in an upwards trajectory is brilliant. So it's a big old crowd to talk to. So I'm going to do my best to try and explain a little bit about what we do. So I haven't prepared lots of slides. I'm not an academic. I'm very much a practical person. But the one slide I have prepared is hopefully quite a powerful piece that signifies our business. So for those that maybe don't know about Piper's Farm, it was founded about 30 years ago by Peter and Henry Gregg, who are in the room, who I know many of you know. And they were very brave and very kind of early in adopting this idea of going, we do not want to see farming continue on the trajectory it's going. We do not want to see the increased sort of intensification, the loss of small-scale family farms, the homogenization of supply chains. And so they decided the only way they could stop that happening was to take back control and to build a market themselves. So they started with a shop in Exeter, and they did a mail order business. They would drive to London, they would go to the food lovers fairs and Borough Market, and they would try and build direct relationships with their customers. About 10 years ago, I joined the business, and really my remit of all sorts of things. In a small business, you tend to do all the jobs from unblocking the drains to helping in the butchery to trying to set up social media. So one of the things that my role really was around was looking at our routes to market, looking at how we grow, how do we get this product out to more people, and how do we get our customers and potential customers to really understand, how that product has been produced, which is incredibly challenging, as I'm sure you guys are aware, as kind of the customer base has become more and more detached from farming. So I inherited the shop. I inherited a small e-commerce website. We would have, a £75 order a day, and I would cheer and go, oh my God, someone's bought on the website, how exciting. And we looked at things like supplying restaurants. Michael Keynes is in the room. He was one of the very early supportive people that helped us on our journey of working with chefs. We looked at growing more shops. We went from 1 to 2, which we thought was a phenomenal growth in quite a short period of time. And we tried lots of different routes to market to find something that we felt fit our kind of skills within the business and was able to support these incredible small-scale farmers. I guess I've got lots of T-shirts from all of those different routes to market, and hopefully I can share some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, some of the benefits of these different routes, and some of the things that I wish somebody had told me when we explored these markets. So I'm really keen to hear from you guys and try and answer any questions that you might have. Today, Piper's Farm has an e-commerce website solely. We have no other route to market, and we supply around 80,000 boxes a year. And at Christmas, we fed about 60,000 people, which is a pretty stressful time to think, don't cock it up. The most important day of the year as well. So, and with that, we're only able to do that because we have an amazing supply chain behind us. So we work with 50 small-scale, mostly family-run farms, all producing meat in harmony with nature. A huge part of our business model is all about the people. So we always knew that we never wanted to scale the farm, become bigger and bigger. As our business grew, it gave us the opportunity to bring on a new farmer. So where we felt, okay, we need more bullocks coming through the pipeline, let's add another farmer on, let's add and add and add. And that is very much my role today, is trying to keep up with our sales trajectory and make sure that the supply chain is coming through. So at every part of what we want to do, it's all about putting people absolutely at the heart of our business and basically supporting them to be able to produce food in harmony with nature and know whatever happens, they have that absolute guaranteed market. So they know that that food that they're producing on that farm is going to go somewhere and somebody's going to value it and appreciate it. They become sort of part of the conversation of being a price maker instead of a price taker. The second sort of thing I want to talk to you guys about is, there are so many different routes to market, and I am hugely sort of passionate about not saying everybody in this room needs to create an online business like Piper's Farm. Everybody in this room should supply restaurants and wholesale. You need to find the thing that gives you a bit of joy, that you think, actually, not only am I being paid fairly for this, but I really enjoy this process, and have a think about the whole kind of farm enterprise. So many of our farmers I speak to, they want to farm. They don't want to be in a room packing boxes. They don't want to be in an office filling out paperwork or dealing with customers or tracking down that DPD parcel that has been thrown over somebody's hedge and booted around the corner. They want to be outside in nature. And so really thinking about, what drives me and what brings me joy is a huge part of thinking differently about those supply chains and finding the right market for you. And then the last thing to say is, we have been on a huge journey of engaging customers and really trying to explain the absolute magic and the unbelievable hard work that goes into getting food to people's tables. And I feel like, this is the bit that is maybe slightly pessimistic, but also slightly hopeful. I think looking for retailers to quickly change the way that they go about supplying food to customers is, as we all know, is not going to happen. Asking government to solve the questions for us is incredibly challenging. So I'm a huge advocate of the grassroots movement. Get on and do it yourself. Work hard and find those routes to market and find those places that you can really gain traction rather than waiting for other people to sort of make that decision for you. So hopefully that explains a little bit about Piper Smart. But I'm really keen to kind of just answer any questions that you guys have about selling direct or any other questions you may have. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Andy Gray. I've been introduced as Farm Wilder, but hopefully I've got a slide coming up in a minute. I only have one. There we are. So that's the sort of things that I do. So a little bit of history. I'm sort of epigenetically a marketeer in as much as my family have sold cider for about 300 years. And so that gave me the opportunity at a very early age to get the sort of endorphin rush of selling things, because there's nothing like it really, and it also sort of gives you that history of experience of that ability to tack and take advantage of changes of context and changes of opportunity and that sort of thing. To give you an example, in the Napoleonic War, there was a lot of quite rich Frenchmen locked up in Dartmoor prison, and they couldn't get any wine, but they could get money. So off the back of the fact that we took them 100 gallons of cider a week, we managed to buy another farm. So it's a... So the world is full of opportunities, and it is just that capacity to see them and take advantage of them. The skill set of marketing, I think, is very similar to farming in as much as it's context-driven, you're adaptive, it's about the capacity to observe and spot new opportunities and that sort of thing. So I think everybody in this room has that the predisposition to being able to do it. It's just whether or not you can bear the sight of the public and talking to them and all that sort of thing, and sorting out all the problems of Mrs. Miggins, who wants 12 drumsticks instead of 13, and she got 13, or that sort of thing. So I grew up producing cider and selling it, and because we had a passing trade of cider customers, when I was 11, I bought 4 tons of main crop spuds off my uncle up in Hampshire in 1976. And hooray, we had a drought, and everybody else's main crops failed. So I quadrupled the price of those spuds and made 500 quid when I was 11. So that sort of encourages you. Those early opportunities and wins do make you think, oh, there's something in this. And I'd sell them anything. I'm not proud. Manure. I used to kill chickens, pluck them and sell them. My father cut down all the elm trees and Dutch elm disease and sold them for pittance. I cut down one hollow one and turned them into flower pots and sold them for more than he did from selling 20 or 30 bunches of firewood. So it's where's the gap? The conversation around that I want to put to you is there's no point in me telling you how to, this is the way to do it, because as Abby says, we're all different. We have different sets of opportunities. If you live on a track down to the beach, you can probably sell ice creams. But if you live in the middle of Devon, it's less and away from the public. It's much less of much less opportunity. So in my early days, I needed to earn money to go to college. So I worked for MC Kelly Limited. I worked on the line, killing and plucking and gutting chickens and turkeys. I hated it, but it made money, and I ended up coming back to it in later life, working there, becoming a director, running it and owning the company. And so we employ about 70 people. We supply hotels and restaurants across Devon and Cornwall, about 450, I guess. The interesting thing with the comparison between all these different things I do is everyone is a slightly different proposition, and everyone is supplying a different sort of need. So the first thing but everybody forgets to do is actually ask the customer what they want. we all assume that we know what they want, but actually that's not necessarily what they want. And then you have to intellectualize whether they told you the truth and whether or not they actually know what they want anyway, and add in all those extra bits on top of it. So MC Kelly sells meat. Originally it was chickens and turkeys. Started in 1955. We're still here now, but that's because we evolved into doing things people want and dropping the things that they suddenly decided they didn't want. I think that what we sell is the fact the meat arrives more than anything else. If you've got 80 people coming for a wedding and the meat that you want for that wedding hasn't turned up, then not buying it from a cheaper supplier who didn't deliver it, that was a terrible mistake. So the fact it arrives is really important. The next most important thing is that when you send it out of the kitchen, it doesn't come back into the kitchen with a complaint, because you might have bought it for 50 pence a steak less, but that tough steak, because it was slightly cheaper, is again a mistake. You've just lost. We bought the steak for £4.50. You sold it for £25. You say you've just lost the value of an awful lot of 50p's on top of that. So sometimes cheapest isn't best, and then. In that situation, people actually just wanted to taste good. So these are the sort of the main propositions in the MC Kelly business, which are critical to what we're trying to achieve there. There's another bit to MC Kelly. I mean, I'm looking at a room full of exploited people because we're farmers. We're exploited by the people who sell us the supplies, but we're also exploited by the consolidated businesses like the slaughterhouses that there are fewer and fewer of them. So one of the other things I've got involved with, which is critical to routes to market, is small-scale slaughter. And I'm working with the Sustainable Food Trust and Lady Jane Parker, working on a mobile slaughterhouse, which is hopefully bringing small-scale slaughter as an opportunity back to the landscape, which for sustainable farming is critical. We can't produce a beautiful product, have a wonderful story to tell, and then become disconnected from it. And also, as a route to market for an industry, we do need that, we need challenger businesses coming up under the big consolidated businesses, constantly producing less monopolised markets. So that's just as an aside on MC Kelly. Moving on to other things on there. We, at the beginning of COVID, effectively, we lost all our customers in a week. So we went, I won't say the word, but in a week, we started meat boxes, which is, what Abby's also doing. They're really good at it. We're not. But at the beginning of COVID, it was really easy because everybody went, Christ, where's our food coming from? So we sold an awful lot of meat boxes at the very beginning. And then it became quite a crowded market. But meat boxes, online marketing is an option, but it isn't easy. And I would not necessarily recommend it. And the one thing you do have to build in is the margin for DPD losing about 5% of your boxes, and or else being late and therefore having to return them and have them returned and that sort of thing. I like the sustainable agriculture side of things, as you might have guessed. So we then opened a label, or we worked with a CIC called Farm Wilder, which is just a small part of what we do. Again, we're not awfully good at it, but we do sell a reasonable amount of these boxes. I'm a great believer in getting people out of their silos and mixing, getting people talking more and more. And the funny thing is that I have 2 vegans and a vegetarian as my brand ambassadors, and that's Chris Packer, Malice Roberts, and Kate Humble, and then a few other minor sort of celebrity presenters who they're all on our website saying, eat this meat, it's good for nature. And we work with farmers across mainly Dartmoor and Exmoor, where we pay them more, and because of the work they do towards regenerative agriculture, plus a bit of extra nature as well. The CIC checks that they're behaving themselves and doing what they should be doing and encourages them along the journey. And then we use that story. So very often marketing is about, we're storytellers. This is how you sell stuff, is by a lot of the time. Sometimes you just provide what people need. Sometimes you're telling a story, hopefully a story that the world wants to buy into. It's amazing how they still won't buy it if it's 10 pence more expensive. But the reality is it still gives you a competitive edge, because even if it's the same price, they'll just go, I'll have that one rather than that one. The world does want to buy into this, but the cynical side of me, which Abby proves is wrong, so I shouldn't be so cynical, but people a lot of people aren't willing to pay that extra, and a lot of people can't afford to pay that extra either. And then, because we hate waste, we started a dog food company, and we mince anything which we can't sell, which I call the economically less relevant bits, so lamb breast and things like that, and we turn it into dog food. That's great. People don't care what they pay for their dogs. Children, well, no way, but dogs. so we make 10 times the margin on the dog food as we do on so we employ 7 people, turn over 1/7 of the amount, and we make just as much money out of the dog food as we do the human food. So there's a lesson for you. Don't produce commodities, produce sort of niche stuff which is just different from everybody else. And so that's been a fantastic thing. So we started the Farmer's Dog, which is a pure meat, and then we did Basil's, where we took over a failing company and turned it around and made a lovely margin on that. Basil's has got more vegetables in it, which just makes you more money. And apparently some dogs like vegetables. But so that's that. And then my sort of final enterprise, which is just starting up, is Exeter Volcanic Quarry. On my 150-acre postage stamp, I have a very exciting stone, which Andy Neal's bored about hearing about, and that's very useful for. It's a heritage stone. A lot of our churches and big houses and small houses are built from this stone, and it's just, you look around, there's an opportunity. It's great. You dig it out of the ground. It doesn't go off in a week. Sorry, Michael, I don't have to deal with diva chefs, and it's just a very low stress business. So a guy turns up, sprays it with a spray can, saying that's the stone I want, and chuck it on a lorry, weigh it. They send me money. It's very simple, really. What's that? Yeah, so the field next door to it is called Mount Hindrance, and you can understand why, because it's a pig to plough. So is that long enough? Okay, right. I should look at my speech and just see what I should have said. But the world is full of opportunities. That's the one thing I will say. I'll tell you one last story. Is I went to the comprehensive school in Crediton. Outside was a public lavatory. The council shut it, and I watched them getting stick over it for about 4 or 5 years. And I thought, I'll buy that. So I bought it and turned it into a burger bar. And it's just an opportunity. Everybody else drove past it every single day. I bought it for not a lot, and it's not just a nice little business, really. So there's a multitude of ways to get to market, but it's entirely down to your context, your personal history, what you enjoy doing, what you hate doing, and just make it up yourselves, really. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be nowhere near as funny as the previous act. I'll try my best. So my name's Bertie Matthews, and I'm from a flour milling family in the Cotswolds. And what I hope to do today in the next 10 minutes is talk a little bit about the mill and what it does, a little bit about our story, and essentially the route to market for farmers is there's many options, but with us there's obviously many options as well. Just from a quick show of hands, who has been brave enough to farm wheat in the last 12 months? Okay, a few of you, well done. Hopefully there's a few more from the last 10 years. It's a great thing to do, and I'm going to explain why. I'll talk a little bit about ourselves. So we're a flour milling company. There's really 18 flour milling companies in the UK. 6 million tonnes worth of grain produced and milled every year. 5 million tonnes of flour. That's 2 million acres. 12 million, well, a lot of millions here, 12 million loaves of bread, 2 million slices of pizza every single day. So it's a huge industry, 18 companies, and we are probably the smallest. Okay, so below us are the windmills and the water mills, but we distribute all over to the UK. So this is us. Family business, 8 generations, been going about 200 years. First 100 years we did farming, obviously couldn't make enough money, so converted to flour milling in 1912. Talk a little bit about our history. So these are generations: Marmaduke, Frederick, Bertie. That's where we are. the fifth of 8 children. Okay, I don't know what that says, but obviously all the ones before me didn't want to do it. So the first one's called Frederick. That's why we've changed it now. Basically, I'll just talk a little bit about a history. I'm not necessarily from a farming background. I'm not necessarily from a milling background. I worked in London. I worked in New York. Because I was the fifth, I didn't expect to be in this position. In 2017, I came back to help my father out for a couple of months before another job. And at that time, we entered into something called a CVA. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's the bit before administration and the bit you don't want to be in. So no idea what a CVA was. I sat in a meeting with my father and my grandfather, and Barclays Bank encouragingly told us that we had a 10% chance of survival. So great career choice by me. Really, really tough time. And actually, when we talk about farming or we talk about producing food or whatever it may be, for us as producers, as flour millers, it's the same thing. It's a very low margin business. It's 1-2% on average net profit. You're dealing with, a commodity that you're trying to make as cheap as possible and turn it into white flour. That was the game, and we were failing at it because we were the smallest. It took 3 years to get out of that situation, and it was super difficult. It was the hardest 3 years of my life. And we did get out because just like you farmers, and you're looking for a route to market, diversification, whether you've got different types of crops or a farm shop or selling online, we had to do the same thing. So what we did as a flour mill, the white flour stuff wasn't working for us. We couldn't make any money from it. So rather than buying from a merchant, another middleman, I'm a middleman, by the way, but another middleman, we decided to work direct with the farmers. So lots of different farmers growing lots of different types of grain and turning them into what is now today the widest range of baking flour anywhere in the UK. We knew we couldn't just sell to the big guys because we couldn't compete on price. So we did plant bakeries, wholesalers, but also small artisan bakeries and selling online and to retail. But in the first 3 years, the retailers didn't really want to speak to me. Rightfully so, I didn't really know what I was talking about. So, look, life is about, hard work and passion and really loving what you do and doing it for a reason. And I felt an immense sense of responsibility, probably too much responsibility at times. So what then happened is 2020 happened and COVID happened. And 2 things occurred, and then we've alluded to it before. One is we were doing 100 and 150 orders online per month, and then the next month we did 250,000. We also lost 30% of our trade, but it was a great opportunity for us. The other thing that happened is those people that didn't really want to be my friends were suddenly my best friends, the guys from Tesco and Waitrose and Co-op, because they were desperate for flour. So great opportunity for us, and we managed to extract ourselves from that 10% survival scenario. So this is where we sort of are today, and we're looking ahead now. So I'm 32. I'm probably still going to be doing this in 30, 40 years, and we need to look at what it is we want to do. Okay, I'm very lucky that there is a guy called Ian Wilkinson from FarmEd who lives, he is about 400 metres away, and I met him in 2018, and I didn't know anything about regenerative agriculture, agroforestry. I didn't know what that was. So inspired by what he was doing, I was like, well, this is it. This is what we've got to do. Conventional flour milling is great, nothing wrong with that, but this is way more interesting. So we've put it at the centre of our strategy. And before you get carried away and think that we're going to be really rich, we're not. And I'm going to explain why in a little bit more. So simple mission, diverse market, lots of routes to market, online, retail, artisan bakeries, really broad product range, because that supports the diversity on the farm, spelts, rye, purchase ackee, durums, all of those kind of things. And selling it wide. And over the next 7 years, doing that and sourcing it from regenerative agriculture, which I'm going to come on to in a minute. So this Regeneration 2030, this is our plan. So we can source grain or wheat from 10,000 acres, of the 2 million. So big impact. But for us, that's our goal, okay? And that's what we want to do. These essentially are the reasons behind doing it. Okay, because it's going to make a difference. And if I'm going to be doing this in 30 years, maybe my daughter will be doing it in 30 years, and I want her to be buying from the same farms with really good soil fertility rather than degrading soil fertility. So really, it's a sustainability strategy. We talked about it before. The most important part of sustainability is a sustainable financial business, and that's our main objective. Well, I can go into this in the questions, but essentially for us, what this means is the farms are incorporating those 5 practices and more. They also are agreeing to a set of standards, a set of audits, and some scientific measurements. And by the way, if anyone can help us out with that, I'd love to talk to them, because trying to get farmers all to do the same scientific measurements is really difficult when you're 32 and they don't want to listen to you. So, because it's like, what do you know? Well, it's true. So our objective is obviously increase soil fertility, increase biodiversity, increase water retention, and carbon sequestration. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about numbers here, and I took this about 2 months ago. Feel free to read it, take a picture. I really don't care. That's why I put it up here. Here are three graphs, and I've taken this from the average conventional yield from 150 farms we deal with this year. I've taken this from the average organic yield from an organic farm that we've taken this year, and the average price. And I've taken that from the average regenerative farm. So this is a farm that's incorporating these 5 practices. They're taking their own measurements. They've been doing it for at least 7 to 8 years. So they're a relatively strict model. Now, that says 7 to 7.5 tonne per hectare. I've seen 8.5. And if we go down to the average price that they're getting and then convert it to per hectare, so how much are they making per hectare? You can see that before you even factor in costs, just from our small data set, the regenerative farms are coming out on top. Not too far away from conventional, because you might get more than that on conventional. But they're not spending money on lots of nitrogen, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. And the reason they're getting those yields, and I'll be honest, is because they've been doing it for a long period of time. So the challenge is going to be, how do we get the new farms who want to do this? And that was going to be my question before. So, and this is give you a bit of an example of what the lowest possible flour cost would be. So if you know any bakers, make sure they don't get screwed over by price. Because a key part, if the objective is, let's make regenerative agriculture just agriculture, then each part of the supply chain can't go, oh, I'm going to make loads of money here. Like, that's not going to work. So we've got to be really fair. And if I'm completely honest with you, the conversations we're having, somebody's going to be squeezed by margin, and it's going to be us, because it's farmer, miller, retailer, or producer, or consumer. And just to give you an example of flour on the shelf, this is branded flour. If you look to the far right, the retailer is going to take at least 40%, if not more. I've seen a lot more than that. Then you've got distribution, then you've got marketing. And by the way, when you deal with the retailers, you have to commit to their marketing. It's another way for them to make money. Would you like to feature in our magazine that no one's read? Oh, okay, fine. So the producer actually isn't getting that much on this particular model. Again, those are some of the key elements that I think are going to be the foundation for the future of this model. So our initial objective is to basically, okay, we can mill this much flour. Let's try and get all of it from regenerative agriculture in the next, between now and 2030. That's the mission. And source 100% of our specialist flours from that model. So we're having these conversations now. We do have a flour within Tesco that comes from a regenerative model. And we're looking at expanding that over the next 6 months, also with Waitrose and Cobb. But also the big change is going to come from the large plant bakeries. Of that 5 million tonne I spoke about, 85% of that flour goes into large industrial bakeries. 10% goes into bakeries in retail, which only leaves 5% for the small baker or the independent. It's a very small fraction. So it's the big businesses that we need to try and convince, and they are starting to listen, and they are looking to come out onto the farms. So that's really important. I'm going to finish by just saying that in May I'm going to get married. So that's quite exciting. Yeah. There's a point to this. There's a point. Who cares? So I met my partner 6 years ago. Okay, so we're past the honeymoon period, I assure you. Okay? And at the beginning, it was super exciting. You know, we knew it was going to be great. We're really passionate. Everything's going to be amazing. That's a bit like regenerative agriculture now, okay? We're all excited. We know it's going to be good. We're not quite sure how it's going to work. But maybe just like a relationship, I think, this is a Valentine's Day sort of pun, just like a relationship, actually, it's the consistent application of commitment and love that's going to yield the greatest results and value in the long term, okay? Someone's happy in the marriage. So hopefully regenerative agriculture and us all working together will essentially will be that. It will just be farming, and that's the plan. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. So 3 really inspirational stories there, and lots to think about. If we start off with a bit of a conversation at the table, then we'll open up to the floor. I'm curious about, all 3 of you have sort of environmental credentials at the heart of your operations. Do sort of conditions of are there conditions of membership if somebody wanted to join as a supplier, and how do you sort of facilitate that transition into your chains if there's some kind of a financial hurdle or operational hurdles? What's the sort of the support structures within the systems?
I think initially there's the people who are quite far ahead on this model, and like I said, then it's are you implementing these practices? Can you prove it? Can a third party prove it or audit it? Do you have measurements to prove what's happening on the farm? Can you allow the visits to happen? So those are the guys or guys and girls who are quite mature on this road. And then I think the harder part is going to be the new farmers looking to incorporate a regenerative model, because there is going to be a challenge in a yield penalty initially, which is going to affect their margins and their financial sustainability. So what we've committed to over the next, at least for the next 6 years, is applying a premium plus. So if the base price is whatever it is, £180 per tonne, you get a milling premium, which you would get anyway, of £60 per tonne, but then we're applying a regenerative milling premium plus, as it were, which is up to another £50 per tonne. So the idea is that when you look at that graph of yield versus price, it will smooth out that transition. So in the short term, hopefully that should help. So that's the plan.
I don't know if we are on. Our business is all about people, and so mindset is incredibly important. So instead of us putting in a big sort of hefty rule book, it is about finding people that are as committed to nature-friendly farming as we are and have that energy and enthusiasm to see those things through, which means that you tend to get more out of them. They're out there testing their soil, they're out there with their Merlin app. And I think there's a lot of things within regenerative agriculture that it's really hard to build into some sort of certification scheme or model. Very much it's about finding the right system, the right mindset, and making sure that fits in with our supply chain. In terms of finances, we're on a journey with people. What we don't want to do is make this so inaccessible that people think, I've got to change the whole farm in order to supply you. That's one of the magical things about Piper's Farm is, you can try, let's say you have an example is one of our farmers grows fodder beet. He started by running just a few pigs on the fodder as a way of reducing his input. So can the pigs, fertilise the soil? Can they help with reducing the ploughing? And then as he sort of felt more comfortable, realised that actually there's there's some money I can make out of these pigs. He can expand that. He now rears lambs for us. He's done turkeys for us before. So that's one of the exciting things about the Piper's Farm model is you're not insisting the farmer has to change absolutely everything because A, we know things take a long time to change, and B, there is a hell of a lot of risk. And so the idea of this is that you can kind of go gradually and slowly and really make sure that A, we're all aligned with our mindset and beliefs, and also that it works for your farming system.
So on our Farm Wilder brand, we have a CIC which basically looks after that supply chain and makes and encourages people along the journey. From the MC Kelly perspective, we just want to sell good tasting meat, and the reality is most of the time we're looking at heritage indigenous breeds and just trying to buy good stuff, which tends to lean more in that direction anyway. And it's very much the emphasis on grass fed. I don't want to sell a barley fed bull beef, and I don't particularly want to sell a continental bullock over most of the time. So it's there's degrees of journey, and I think it's very much important, but we don't negatively market, and I'm sure none of us here do negatively market and say they're rubbish, we're good. We just say we believe in what we're doing and we're really proud of what we do, and I think that's a really key message when it comes to marketing at any time.
Great, thank you. Maybe just to pick up on that point, from the consumer perspective, do you get a sense of where the consumer opinion fits in? And you mentioned quality earlier, Andy, that quality seems to be the fundamental factor for your consumers. But what about the sort of the environmental credential? And how can the consumers access that sort of at the supermarket shelf, as it were?
Well, we hate supermarkets, so be antichrist as far as we're concerned. But
Yeah, of course, you're not. Yeah, you're independent. But how can they access it at the shelf? Be it the internet or yeah.
But yeah, the consumer. I mean, Abby is the real queen when it comes to this sort of thing from the point of view of selling that, but delivering the story with the meat and getting that consumer buy-in. And we know it's there, and it's something which we all can take advantage of.
It's really simple. If it doesn't taste good, they won't buy it again. So starting out with every single part of our system, it's all about the absolute eating quality. So it's why we work with native breeds. It's why we believe pasture-fed beef is better than grain-fed beef. We think it tastes better. It's why we hang everything. It's why we have a whole carcass butchery and we continue to train butchers and invest money in doing that. It's why that we tweak everything from shall we hang pigs for 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and what does that happen to the flavour profile? We're constantly testing and tweaking everything within our supply chain and within how we go to produce that food, because we want to make it absolutely incredible for the consumer. So they go, oh my God, this is so much better than the supermarket, and I'm willing to stick with you, I'm willing to support your farmers, and I passionately believe in what you guys are doing, because the proof is in the eating.
And I think we've missed the really boring stuff, and that is it has to be safe. It has to be legislatively, right in all ways. It's got to have the right labelling. It has to have a health mark. It has to be processed within the cold chain, and this whole set of prerequisites before you actually get to the point of telling your story or anything else. So don't think it's just well, hey, this is great, because it's a lot more than that.
You've said it all. Yeah.
Okay, we've got some time. Shall we open up to the audience? Yeah, and straight away there's a hand up here. Do we have some microphones? The gentleman just there.
Thank you. I'd be interested to know the radius of the farms that supply each of your businesses, because it appears to me that there are hotspots generated by the marketing receptacle, let's call it, and if you're within the radius of their arc, fine. Bertie, you said you were buying from 10,000 acres. That, I think you're based at Wantage. That doesn't get you down here. So what's the radius of your of your supply chains, and what do we do about the bits in between, especially in the capital-heavy processing industries like milling?
So can I just jump on that?
Yeah, of course.
So it's really interesting. We started very southwest heavy. We have our farm, 50 acres, and Peter and Henry went out to the neighbours. It's easy. They're on the doorstep. You can talk to them. It makes everything smooth. As the business has kind of grown, there is a bit of a misconception that Piper's Farm is only in the southwest or only in Devon. We actually have farms all around the country. So we have farms in Suffolk. We have farms, in all the different kind of nooks and crannies and corners of the country. But actually, for us, what is the most integral part of the supply chain is having a small-scale abattoir on the doorstep. So instead of thinking about travelling, live animals to, 2 hours or bringing them down to Devon for them to be killed, they have to travel locally, and then that carcass can then travel the distance of the country. So in terms of our model, we very much see it as it should be able to reach anywhere and everywhere in the country, as long as there's that small-scale abattoir. And like Andy, I've been part of the abattoir sector group. Peter's been very actively involved. It's so vital that we support that infrastructure. And I guess that's the thing that we haven't really kind of covered in this about supply chains, is all of those other ancillary businesses that are really, really integral to making this happen.
Rephrase the question. What radius to the control point, the processing point then?
So again, it doesn't really matter. So from the abattoir to our processing.
From the farm to the abattoir.
Oh, from the farm to the abattoir. Again, depends on species and lots of other factors, but we would say an hour travel is, chicken, poultry, it would be on farm or half an hour, for example. And again, it depends on how many birds you're taking. There's lots of factors. It's not kind of a one rule fits all. But yeah, having that ancillary business, having that small scale abattoir on the doorstep is integral to us scaling our business.
And the answer for us is probably about 200 miles. The Wantage is the ex-Wessex mill, not us. We're very close. We have picked up grain from Cornwall. past Birmingham all the way, as far as Essex as well. It depends what it is. Also on a small scale. So if you've got a farm and you're growing wheat and you're thinking, I want to try something that's high value, like a spelt or like a durum or something like that, and you've got a 10-acre field, we can put it in tote bags and collect, pick it up when we've dropped off our flour down to the bottom of Cornwall. So relatively large radius because we're in the middle of the country, about 200 miles, and even more so if the farming model suits what we're looking for.
I can just tell one story about my best version of it, which is I managed to walk my beef cattle from my silvo pasture across the car park into my lairage using my no-fence collars for my bed.
Okay, there's one just down here that we've got.
Hi. I think it's fantastic that there are so many different ways of getting regenerative farmed produce to market. Do you think there will be a time when regeneratively farmed produce is available on the supermarket shelf to the people who are living on benefits and low incomes? And actually the majority of the population, not the people who can afford meat boxes and artisan flour?
Great question. And if you go to Tesco today, I think our bag of all-purpose flour is about £2. So in comparison to 90p, when's that going to happen? And I think that will naturally happen as the more and more farms are growing regen ag, and if the price point can be right. But I think we also have to remember that there are loss leaders in the supermarkets where the farmer and the supermarket isn't making any money, but it's achieving that other pivotal objective, which is affordable food for the masses.
I am deeply involved with food poverty generally anyway. I do find it a fascinating subject and something which we need to all be aware of. My view on regen farming is actually we're taking costs out of the system and if this is the model for the future, it doesn't necessarily have to be any more expensive. I think the biggest challenge with food poverty is actually people's capacity to engage with their food, work out how to use for cheaper cuts, and it's much more societally systemic, really. And the other thing is we spend too much money on paying rent on our houses and not enough on buying our food in the first place anyway. So food poverty is much more complex than just the regenerative angle on it.
In a similar sort of vein, really, the three fantastic businesses, family-run businesses. If you look 65, 70 million people in the country, realistically, what percentage of their food requirements can come from family-run businesses like this? And how do we then deal with the commodity sector and what they've got to offer to what will always be, I guess, the big majority?
I think that there's a natural churn in the way businesses work and operate, and new opportunities open up, and the small business one day becomes the big business. So I think it's just important that we have startups and small businesses like ours to ultimately become part of that bigger story. And on top of that, ultimately people are just going to. We're the early adopters, but others will step in line behind us. And I think that there is a sort of onward march of the whole regen movement generally, and I think it'll become much more landscape-based anyway. So, it will end up feeding the rest of all, but it will happen just at its own speed.
I completely agree with that. Flour goes into 99% of households, so a whopping 1% of the market, which is what we are. We're not going to cut the mustard here. So it's going to acquire the larger organisations, of which all of those flour milling organisations, 80% of them are family businesses. They're not talking about it yet, but I'm sure they will follow on pretty quickly. So I think from a flour perspective, it will happen naturally. It couldn't be happening fast enough, as far as my opinion is.
Just to add to that, I think it's happening in other countries. We can quite often just think what's happening on our shores and just think that that's it. There's this big kind of fortress around us, and that's where it is. There are other farming systems in other countries that are showing that this is possible. What we need to be careful of that we don't constantly just listen to the narrative of
oh, you can never feed the world, you can never do this. I think, a lot of the science is showing that we can, and a lot of the science is showing that we're going to have to make it work. So.
I think this is a similar theme, but a number of people in the room engaged with public procurement over recent years, and particularly the Southwest Food Hub, which didn't sadly get off the ground. But I wonder what each of the panellists are doing to engage with local food procurement, particularly schools, hospitals, military, etc., and whether you're able to get your food into those kind of public places, which is such an important use of it.
I supply Exeter University with all its meat needs, as I do with Falmouth, and quite a lot of schools. And quite a lot of schools have hubs where hubs of excellence. Basically, sort of down in South Hams, for instance, there's 9 or 10 schools all in a hub, and we supply them. The opportunities are there in public procurement, but big wins are. We've talked about for years and years, and we never quite get in. The MOD, the hospitals, and things like that. We go through TUCO, which is the University Buying Consortium. For that, that's a model which works beautifully well. They're really interested in the sustainability because the students are interested in sustainability. I think Exeter Uni is actually an exemplar when it comes to this sort of thing. When it comes to the buying here, at least, so it is possible. I've been talking to Steve Barclay about getting meats into venison in particular into the MOD and hospitals in the last month or so. So there's always that. We're always on the cusp of doing it. We just an awful lot of the time we just don't quite get over that cusp, and that's down to blockers within the procurement chain who just can't be bothered a lot of the time, and somehow we need that political will to drive it over the line.
If you've got any contact emails or phone numbers that I could use, that would be great and really helpful. A short thing is, we'd love to, and we'd love to do it more, and it just takes time.
Hi there. Yeah, just continuing on the discussion around the small abattoirs over here. You mentioned about this mobile abattoir project, which I've heard rumbling along in the background for quite a few years. So I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on that and where it's up to at present.
Well, mobile's an exaggeration. It's actually movable. It takes quite a lot of effort to move it. But this is the beginning of a concept which is growing. So we've had this is the Fur Farm one. It's a lorry. It's an articulated lorry which the lorry cab disappears, leaving it there, and we shove a bullock in one end, and it sort of crash and bang, wallop, and bits of bullock come out the other end, and that's basically how it works. And it's a great concept, and it's a hub model, so you can move it. I have it for a period of time, and then Fur Farm in Gloucestershire has it for a certain amount of time. You could fit it around a market, for instance. You need infrastructure. You need a lairage. You need dirty water handling, and you need somewhere for the vet to go to the loo and fill in their forms and all that sort of thing. The most important thing with it is it's shaken up the thinking of the Food Standards Agency and it's made them think differently. And off the back of that, we've now got £4 million fund for small abattoirs to invest at a 40% recovery rate. So it's really good from that point of view. In the meantime, I've been asked by the Scilly Isles to build them a movable unit to go out to the Scilly Isles. And again, it's all incredibly context-driven, so they only want to kill about 75 bullocks a year. So you can't afford an awful lot of capital expenditure. But the interesting thing is you can't have landscape recovery in a Scilly Isles perspective without livestock on the landscape. There's a risk to that livestock if they lose the ability to move it off the islands. So these projects do not mistake, they are critical to certain communities. And the Isle of Wight are coming to look at it. The Orkney Isles have been, all these islands have been trying to get slaughter units on their ground all this time. It's a fascinating sandpit to play in at the moment. So yeah, it's good.
There's 2 more questions. There's one here and then one over there, and then we'll finish for tea. So yes, please.
Yep, thanks very much. Question for Bertie. I work in the red meat sector. There's a lot of talk there about doing away with the Europe grid and bringing in a more sort of far-reaching meat spec that brings in sort of nutritional quality, eating quality, that sort of thing. Do you think that there's room in the sector that you work in to bring in a more sort of all-encompassing pricing structure for flour or for milling wheat?
What do you mean by all-encompassing? To transparent or
to encompass some of these sort of, at the moment you're paying on a tonnage with all that, the milling premium. Do you think, as some of these other sort of nutritional benefits that are commonly associated with regen are proved or more widely recognised, that there might be room for them to be reflected in the price that farmers get for the wheat?
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't tell you this, but if you're a farmer and you are doing it on a spec and it's normally on a protein spec, you should be paid a lot more if it goes well over the spec, because the flour mill is going to be making money. And I'm super screwing myself over here, but because bakers care about protein strength, protein quality, and water absorption. So you should ask, if you do deal with a subsidiary flour mill, it's not ours, you should ask for the specification back and say, oh, okay, well, how does that compare to others, and can I be paid more? Because we have done it with super high protein wheats that have come from conventional or regenerative agriculture, where you buy it on 13%, but they might have 14.5%. So you absolutely deserve more, for sure. Push back.
I'll bear that in mind, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, and our last question, please.
It's more of an observation, really, because been mentioned a couple of times in dispatches. But from the culinary perspective, and just talking about how we're seeing the movement in our end of the market, first of all, a lot of this is being driven by more sustainable approaches in terms of cooking, but also provenance, where the food's from, and also the effect that hospitality and the catering industry is having on sustainability. So we're seeing a lot of customers asking about where their food's from, what the food practices is behind it. A lot of people are choosing to come and stay in places of hospitality because they've got those credentials. So I can see the move from regenerative farming moving more into the mainstream. And you're absolutely right. It's all about quality. We can't produce great food unless we know where it's from and the quality of the food that's being produced from the farming. And we're prepared to pay for that. And our customer is proving that they are willing to pay for that too. So provenance is really key, and it's one of the key things that's coming out. It's what you're producing and what you do really does matter. But more importantly, the way that you produce it is making a big fact in the choice of the customer as well. So keep going.
So I think what the discussion has really brought out and what unifies all of the three examples we've heard is a strong sense of collaboration and open-mindedness. And I think that's really something for us to take away from today, and I think reflects strongly the spirit of Rootstock. So thank you very much to our three speakers. So yeah, time for a short tea break now.
Could I please get a photo?
It will only get better. Our final session is about people, broadly about people and policy. And Dr. Alice Mosley, our final chair, is from the University of Exeter and researches behavioural policy. I don't know whether she knows anything about why it's so difficult to get people to sit down in a room. But her insights on broader engagement and policy are deeply relevant to everything we've been talking about. But just as important is her perspective from being part of a family farming business that runs an organic livestock farm, and her work on in mid-Devon on the Ruby County and zero transitions. Anyway, but in the interest of time, I'll hand over to Alice now, and she'll take you through the final session. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, so as you can hear from my accent, I'm not from round here, but I have been living in Devon for well over 20 years, based at the University of Exeter, and great to see so many colleagues here from Exeter, but also so many farmers here who share our experience and passion for farming. And we have a fantastic panel who are going to talk about issues around the kind of human and political side of all the issues we've been talking about today. So we've had loads of really inspiring talks, helping us as farmers think about, routes to market, about looking after soil, about, animal management and so forth. And I think what I hope we can achieve from this session is to think about some of the, I guess, the more human elements to those processes, those challenges, and think about how we can support each other as peers, also what other sources of support there are in terms of, kind of policy support, in terms of finance. It's been an extremely challenging environment for anyone who's been trying to farm for the last few years, politically, economically, and now environmentally as well. And I think everyone here is kind of sharing a kind of commitment to farming in a really, productive, efficient and kind of environmental way. But sometimes kind of there are blockages that we need to acknowledge to getting there. And so I think what we hope to get from this session is a kind of broader understanding of, what are the political forces kind of shaping the context that we're trying to farm in, and also what are some of the opportunities both for support, information, advice, and also thinking of kind of mental health aspects as well to what we're doing. So what I'll do is introduce you to our speakers. We're going to have three sessions and then a Q&A, and then we're going to have a fourth speaker coming up afterwards. So first of all, we have Alex Stevens and Wakely Cox, who are going to talk about farmers collaborating together in a really interesting example of a project in Dorset in the Poole Harbour area, where they were kind of looking at a project involving nitrate offsetting and how farmers have been working in collaboration, also with the support of some of the regulatory bodies, to kind of try and achieve more sort of landscape scale change to practices. And then we're going to have a presentation from Charles Courtney next. And Charles has got a really unique perspective. He wears lots of different hats, which he will tell you all about. But one of them is kind of in the political context, sitting in the House of Lords, so can kind of give us a perspective from national policy in terms of what priorities are there and how we as a community and you can feed into those processes in meaningful ways so that you're helping to shape the way that money is spent and allocated. And then bringing that kind of more to a kind of local level, we've got Stuart Horn and Scarlett Buck here, who many of you will know from the advice that they've given to farmers throughout Devon to help them make use of the sources of support and finance that are available, and have a really unique perspective on kind of the bottom line of what it is to be able to make a farm business work. And then after, we'll round up with some Q&A, and then we've got Professor Matt Lobley, who's down here. Sorry, Matt, there was not enough seats, but we have put you there for a reason, which is that we want to finish the day with a really important kind of message about mental health and well-being. And so Matt's going to kind of come up and talk about some research that he's been doing with Rebecca Wheeler that kind of, really makes us think about some of the really key aspects of farming life, which I think are important to reflect on. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to Alex first, and Wakely is going to feed in. There's going to be a bit of a double act here. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that all working? Pucker, that's good. Hello, everybody. I'm Alex from the NFU, and Wakely is my partner in crime today, or the Batman to my Robin. And he's the most important one here, really, because I'm going to talk sort of theoretically about some stuff that's been going on in Dorset in the Poole Harbour catchment. Wakely is our sort of most valuable player, the farmer who's coordinated everybody together to try and get some action on the ground and to get farmers buying into what is a complex scheme, but I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. So, I don't know how well it shows up on here, but certainly on the TV screens it's a bit better. This is Poole Harbour, for anyone that hasn't seen it before. It's quite unique. It's, I think it's about the 5th natural harbour that claims to be the 2nd biggest one in the world. But it's quite unique because it's very narrow at its sort of at the entrance. It's quite shallow. I'll explain a bit more about why that's important in a moment. But it basically means that lots of nutrients that are applied to the ground, not just from farming, this is also about water companies, house builders, all sorts of other folks as well, can end up in the harbour over a period of time through quite a complicated process of going through the very chalky soils. And also rivers and streams as well. And they can end up in the harbour, and there's not a sort of obvious system of kind of washing it in and out like you get in a lot of natural harbours, so it tends to sit there. So that's basically the issue, why we had to respond to a particular challenge, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a moment. So that's just a bit more info on the catchment itself. So it's a natural harbour. Over 30 square kilometres, so it's pretty big, the harbour itself, but it's kind of got lots of little dog legs and pockets and bits where if you ever get the chance to walk around it, and it's definitely well worth a visit, you'll see some of the hotspot areas where this kind of microalgae is, it's called opportunistic microalgae, and it's very opportunistic. It latches onto those nitrates in the water and grows super quickly. So that's the challenge we've got, and that's the challenge with the layout. I'll talk a bit about the farming in a moment and some of the soil types and things, but there are all sorts of reasons that mean that Poole has become an absolute pain in the arse for a number of challenging reasons that relate quite a lot back to agriculture, but also to other industries as well. So that's why we took this by the scruff of the neck. So the circumstances are pretty unique, but the challenge isn't a kind of recently understood one. It's one that we've known about for a while. It's a reason that the area has been an NVZ for quite a long time. And the reason for mentioning the NVZ is that we're trying to do actions now that will have a fairly immediate outcome. But the changes brought in by the NVZ mean that for a lot of that kind of historic nitrate and nitrogen that's flowing down through the soils to the harbour, it can take sort of 30 years or so to find its way through. So there's also an element of some of the actions that were done a number of years ago. We will see the results of those. So there are all sorts of things changing at one time that make this particularly complicated. It's a mixed farming area, just like we're in now. It's genuinely mixed farming. So there are lots of mixed farmers, but equally there are sort of big arable units, smaller, lower input grazing areas as well, and lots of dairy farms too. And that presents challenges, but it also presents an opportunity when it comes to potentially trading nitrate credits between a group of farmers. And I'll explain a bit about that in a moment. So the key driver for change here, I mentioned, NVZ, all that sort of stuff had happened. Then in 2015, there was a judicial review brought forward by Fish Legal, WWF, and some others, basically arguing the case successfully that DEFRA hadn't done enough to protect Poole Harbour and hadn't done enough to stop nitrates entering the harbour, and that there were other tools available to them that they hadn't used, particularly a water protection zone, which was terrifying for farmers because although there aren't many instances of water protection zones being used, potentially they can be quite draconian, but also it's very one-size-fits-all and doesn't sort of fit the nuances of a mixed farming area and different farm enterprises, and could mean that certain farming types would be completely restricted. And particularly sort of arable and dairy were particularly nervous about that. And I'll talk a bit about where they fit in terms of who leaches what in a moment. So, water protection zone, terrifying. I think I can probably move on from this bit, but I'm sure in the questions, do quiz Wakely on what it might have meant for his business and why he signed up and all that kind of stuff, because it is terrifying. It's a lack of flexibility. It's pretty draconian. So we wanted to avoid that through a voluntary initiative if we could. And the voluntary initiative was the Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme, or is the Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme. And that's just sort of in its early stages now, but going into year 2 with over 200 farmers signed up and a huge amount of progress, which I'll mention in a moment. But just to cover the journey, really. So my colleagues and and other sort of farmers in the patch were really keen to find a way forward that meant we could reduce the amount of nitrogen entering the harbour, achieve the objectives that the Environment Agency and Wessex Water and others want to get to, avoiding kind of a big stick basically in the form of legislation, and achieving the goals that that are needed in the patch. So we came up with a scheme, a trading scheme basically, but needed to get buy-in from the Environment Agency that this wasn't just about kind of moving the deck chairs around. We actually, we have to reduce the amount of nitrate that's leaching. There's something called a glide path, which is basically a goal that we're getting towards. That means we reduce the amount of nitrate going into the system year on year. Farmers can work towards that end. I'll talk about that in a moment as well. We had to design a scheme. We had to get some funding. So we successfully, NFU applied for funding from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, some public funding and support from Triodos Bank as well, which meant that we could go out and test different models. We could test what a farmer might want to sign up to. We could look at some of the challenges around implementation and head them off. We could look at the correct tool for establishing baselines, that kind of stuff. And the upshot of that was there isn't anything on the shelf that can be used, but there are things out there that we can tweak a little bit. And the nitrate leaching tool developed by the Environment Agency was the nearest thing to that that's available and approved to be able to run a scheme. We also used the funding to test the principles of trading. What does it mean to set up a trading body to trade credits? What does it mean in terms of having the right structure to support the farmers that own the group? They're fully sort of constituted as a trading body now, and farmers sign up to be part of that group. And as I said, there's 202 that have signed up to be part of the scheme. So we used the funding really carefully to make sure we crossed every kind of T and dotted every I so that there weren't any unintended consequences out there. There have been a few, which I'll come on to at the end, which were a bit challenging. But basically, a huge amount of work went into coming up with something that we could talk to farmers about and try and get some buy-in. For the NFU, this isn't what we normally do. So we're a lobbying organisation. So, the first thing for me is going out and talking to, Alan Lovell, who's here today, and other colleagues about why we don't want heavy regulation, why there's another way, and how we might be able to achieve it. We don't normally do the kind of sort of the business end of trying to design a scheme, implement a scheme, get sign up, that kind of thing. That's normally down to the market to do. But we felt this was so important that we wanted to intervene, we wanted to drive this forward, and we wanted to achieve real change. And you'll see as I kind of progress through this that what's happening in Poole Harbour, what's happening now in neighbouring catchments is going to happen in some way, shape or form in most places. Phil on the River Axe has got issues with phosphates. We've all got different challenges in water catchments. It might not be nitrates everywhere, but there will be something and some reason that farmers can work together to share the load and achieve a good outcome. So we started with expressions of interest. We ended up getting 202 farmers signing up for an approved scheme. We used the nitrate leaching tool that the Environment Agency put together. If you're a farmer signed up to the scheme, then your data is analysed by the scheme manager, Louise, who looks through and sort of aggregates it and sends that back to the Environment Agency anonymously. If you're a farmer in the catchment who's not part of the scheme, then your information is shared. You'll almost certainly get a visit from the Environment Agency. It's a different experience for you. And we've managed to, I think I've skipped through some of that already, but I mean, effectively, we've managed to offer something to those farmers that sign up that's better than the alternative. And the alternative is very much about coming under scrutiny for everything that's going on farm. You know, we did our own analysis of compliance on farm. We found that a significant number weren't compliant with all elements of farming rules for water, had issues around SAFO compliance, all that kind of stuff. So we've managed to make sure we can drive positive change with those farmers that sign up and help them to improve so that they achieve the scheme objectives, not just through the nitrate leaching tool, but also through their own sort of wider compliance. And just for a bit of background, the nitrate leaching tool, it looks at things like, how early are you establishing crops? Do you have cover crops? What's your yield? All that kind of stuff. That's about not just being smart with your inputs, it's also rewarding efficiency and the amount that you're producing, and giving you a chance to make sure that the land stays with a cover on it and is achieving good outcomes across the board. So there are a suite of things within the nitrate leaching tool that farmers can do to comply. They mean different things for different sectors and different crops, and occasionally we see that sometimes the tools being, this is still very much in development. We've had challenges recently around some measures that were available to farmers in year 1 being pulled in year 2, but I'll talk about that again in a moment. But this is very much a work in progress, and that's why I hope that this Poole Harbour project will then dictate the direction of travel for other areas so that lessons can be learned. So we've managed to host a steady stream of really important policymakers within the patch. I think Alan's even there. So this is significantly important as a national project, and politicians are taking note, policymakers are taking note, because this is a real example of farmers working together to achieve something. I know I could be driven out of Devon for saying this, but I don't think this could have just happened anywhere. We had the right farmers in the right place, willing to work together, with a history of working together on, TB-related stuff, on cluster groups, on all sorts of other things as well. So we knew that we had farmers who were willing to try something, and with over, 76% of the catchment signing up to the project in terms of area, that we knew that we could get there, and we knew that we had farmers keen to take part. In terms of the challenges, so I've mentioned a clunky nitrate leaching tool, and do ask Wakely what it's like to complete that, what it's like to do it. We have changes to measures within the nitrate leaching tool being tweaked and changed all the time. Because we are at the vanguard of this, it means we're also kind of in the firing line for little tweaks and little changes that sometimes happen without consultation and sometimes are mightily frustrating to the farmers involved. Again, that's another one to go for Wakely on. We're finding that there hasn't necessarily always been that kind of level of scrutiny of what is a local project but is nationally significant. So we'd like to make sure that all policymakers across the board are watching this, and not just those who are locally trying to deliver a particular outcome. And we're concerned really as well that the nitrate leaching tool we have, it works, but it's really hard to fill in. It requires training. It requires significant amounts of time investment. So again, we want to see that evolve and change over time. So moving on to the good stuff, though, we've got loads to be proud of. We've got a scheme that's been set up that's got farmers signed up and delivering. Importantly, the bit that you're probably interested in is how are farmers fared in terms of getting towards that glide path and getting towards that measure. You probably saw it on one of the slides earlier. But effectively, the target that we had was, in around sort of 24-ish kilos of N per hectare being leached. They smashed it in the first year. So farmers adopted the measures, they adopted best practice, and they managed in the first year against the target to achieve 17.96 kilos of N per hectare. So that was a great reduction. We felt like we were slightly victims of our own success because it feels like that was part of the reason for tweaking some of the measures within the NLT. But the important thing to remember is that, yeah, that was year one. Yeah, it looked great. But this is a long-term thing. Yields were pretty good in 2022 for the winter crops particularly. There was less nitrogen applied to the land during the hotter weather because there was no point while the grass wasn't growing. So we're expecting that the 2023 figures, which are being filled in now by farmers who are completing the tool, will be very different and will probably look a bit worse than they did for 2022. And in terms of the breakdown, it very much paints the picture you'd expect with a mixed farming area, where for the average arable farm, their leaching figures were 28.86 kilos of N per hectare, whereas at the other end of the scale, mixed livestock was 7.14, sheep in the middle, 9 and a bit, dairy at 15. So you can see there is the ability for farmers to trade nitrogen credits with each other within the group with the different farming systems. And hopefully, as we continue to come in underneath that glide path, there'll be the opportunity to trade outside with non-farming groups like house builders and others who are needing to offset some of the things they're doing, which could potentially add another source of income for farmers. So that's the nuts and bolts of what happened, how it evolved, and where we are now. And I'll shut up, but do think of lots of questions for Wakely, please.
So I haven't done a slideshow, but I bought some props. It's the graveyard shift. I'm sure you're all feeling like a pick-me-up, so I'm not going to submit you to death by slides. But as Anna said, I'm here to talk about the work that I do and the various hats that I wear. And in order to do that, I bought the hats. First of all, I farm a bit. I live at Powderham Castle, and we have an estate, obviously, the other side of the estuary. And it's a mixed estate. We have the deer part that we actually farm ourselves, but we also have quite a lot of arable that we do under contract farming. We have wonderful tenant farmers who are in the room, and then we have a lot of grazing as well, and forestry, and obviously quite a tourism business that sits around that. But I'm not just a farmer. I'm also a lawyer. And in that respect, I work at Mitchell Moores. And I would just like to say thank you to Mitchell Moores. I had a chat with Harry back last year, who was asking whether Mitchell Moores would be interested in sponsoring this. I don't particularly practice in the agricultural rural space. I'm an IP and tech litigator. But Mitchell Moores said yes, they would like to support it, and I think it's really, really good of them to lend support to an event such as this, because it is so important. And I will talk a little bit further about the work that they're doing in the space. But finally, I want to introduce my final hat, and this is the real reason for doing this. I'm also the Earl of Devon. And this has been sitting in a cupboard since 1952. I wasn't allowed to wear it last year because I didn't get an invitation to the coronation. So I came up with this device to get it out of the cupboard and actually wear it in public. Anyway, they're the coronation hat. But it's actually, in the context of being the Earl of Devon, obviously, in 2018, I applied for a vacancy on the crossbenches in the House of Lords, and quite surprisingly was successful. And I obviously I'm not a politician, I'm not party political, I sit on the crossbenches. But I do sit there championing the interests of Devon. I thought that was probably the job, and it's been the same job we've done since 1142, and it's quite interesting to be that conduit of information from Devon up to Westminster and from Westminster down to Devon. And I came in just after Brexit, and I wasn't a Brexit fan. I thought it was probably a mistake. I'm French, so French family, and we quite like a unified Europe. But you know, there were opportunities that Brexit presented, and those opportunities were particularly stark for us in the rural community, because we obviously got out of the common agricultural policy, and the first
chunky piece of legislation I got to work on was the Agriculture Act, and it all happened during lockdown, and so we were zooming into Parliament and debating this legislation around the creation of ELMS, the creation of SFI, the 3 tiers and everything, and it was really fascinating to see how the sausages are made. And we moved on from that to do the Environment Act and the introduction of local nature recovery strategies, particularly biodiversity net gain, which is something that many of us are wrestling with. And one thing in particular that I worked very closely with the NFU on was this idea of conservation covenants, whereby if you are committing your land to certain conservation outcomes, you can bind your successors in title to a positive obligation. I'm a landlord and tenant, or a land lawyer, a real property lawyer in my youth, and you'd never been able to bind your successors in title to do anything positively in the whole of English property law over 1,000 years. And for the first time in history, we were introducing this new piece of property law. When it was originally drafted, you could create these conservation covenants by signed writing. That would be an email exchange between you and a developer. You as a farmer and developer could bind your successors in title in perpetuity. And I thought that's a bit weird because, you know, that's quite a big commitment you're making. And so I put my hand up in the debate and said, well, hang on, shouldn't this be at least considered? And we got it amended so that conservation covenants can only be executed by deed. More work for lawyers, perhaps. But it means that when we're creating these agreements and going into these deals, you actually take advice. And I think it was quite an important amendment to make. And what's interesting is that was me as a solo crossbencher with no party politics behind me, with the NFU actually working closely with me, and you can actually change the law. And that surprised me, but shows that actually if you do get the opportunity, if you have an issue that you want to be addressed in Parliament, you want to change the law, you really can do it. And I'd encourage you, you know, my main stump speech here is to encourage you to engage in the process. We may be rule takers, we may think like we're rule takers, but we are also inspirational, and we can make changes. And then subsequent to that, there's been quite a lot of additional work coming out of Parliament, obviously, with respect to, we've heard about Poole Harbour. There was lots of kerfuffle this summer around nutrient neutrality and developers saying this is terrible, these environmental regulations. And Rishi Sunak decided, I think over a couple of weeks in August, to get rid of all the nutrient neutrality rules. And bravely, the Duke of Wellington resisted him, which was really exciting. And so nutrient neutrality rules remain. It's less important down here, but obviously in Poole Harbour and elsewhere, it really is quite significant. And then we're looking at now the implementation of SFI. You know, we spent months debating where SFI would be spent, where the money would go, what we would encourage. And the debates were absolutely fascinating if you want to read Hansard and see the various interests that were being debated. But now DEFRA is doing the really hard work of implementing that and bringing out all these SFI prescriptions, which we're about to hear about. And then the other piece that is now rolling out is the local nature recovery strategy and the work of Devon County Council. At Mitchell Moors, we obviously do an awful lot of that work. The agricultural team, Rachel's here today, have been doing a natural capital roadshow. There are so many areas of funding that are developing, you know, biodiversity net gain, getting payments from developers, nutrient offsetting, you know, can you get private finance into that to stack on top of your SFI payments? How do you structure it? How, if you're a tenant, do you get consent from your landlord? All of those issues are complicated, need thinking through, and there are not many law firms doing it, and we're lucky, I think, in the Southwest to have some good law firms dealing with that and really leading the charge. And then how do you get private finance into that? We've done a bunch of work with Gresham House and other private finance areas, you know, to bring private money into this industry. And what I think is really exciting, you know, for generations, certainly since the Second World War, farmers have been takers of handouts, takers of regulation. But we as land managers actually own the asset that people need, which is the ability to sequester carbon, the ability to offset nutrients, etc. We are the ones, for once, in control, and I think we need to think about that and be responsible and actually take some benefit from that, which is a big change of psyche for us. And then the other thing that we're doing at Powdram is having some really interesting conversations with our neighbours. There are some farmers up the Ken Valley that we've been meeting with to talk about sort of water catchment opportunities. And then there's a conversation underway with the Environment Agency and others around the whole ex-estuary basin from Haldon all the way to Woodbury and up to Killerton, to try and create a land management scheme over a large area of land. Many of you will be within that area of land, but it's been a bit of a sort of passion project of mine, particularly based around the Exminster Marshes, is can we do something that everybody can buy into for the benefit particularly of Exeter, of Exmouth, of these large populations, who are using our natural capital, our fresh air, fresh water, our sea defences, the food that we're making, and actually try and get a proper transfer of interest, of payment, of support, so that people are really seeing how we are using our land is to their benefit. That's very much at inception stage, but there's certainly interesting conversations going on. So I think, hopefully I haven't used up too much time. That's me in my 3 hats.
Hello. Thanks very much, Charles. Really interesting to hear about both those projects, examples of kind of bottom-up collaboration coming from the farming community themselves to kind of try and find ways of doing things locally, but also influencing national policy and trying to kind of act as role models for other parts of the country. So thank you, Alex and Charles, both for those insights, and also always good to hear about ways in which the policy process is happening, and ways that we always like hearing about the cut and thrust of national level politics, but also importantly inspiring people to think about how locally you can feed into policy processes. Always banging the drum for that. So now we're going to hand over to Stuart Horn, who's going to talk about the sustainable farming incentives and other policy developments that we've all been kind of grappling with, and hopefully with some practical advice for those who are trying to make the most of those schemes in the sort of changing environment that we're in. So thanks, Stuart.
Yep, thanks, Alice. I'm not sure I'm covering all that in the few minutes I've got, but never mind. We'll do our best. Great to see you all again this year. Good to be asked back. I must have said something okay last time. Sustainable farming incentive. First slide. Remember this guy? How many ministers ago was it? I've lost count. But he did say that what he wanted to develop when we left the EU and we get our own UK farming policy, he wanted something where farmers could sit at their computer at 9 o'clock, work away through the day, and be able to go out to the pub at 5 o'clock, have a pint, all done. In terms of the application, he's quite right. It's a very simple application process. However, I think it's a little more complicated than he first envisaged. And I think farmers have seen that as we've seen it, because they say, well, why don't we know? Why don't we know? It's been a constant development in terms of how it's evolved. And that's been purposely done in a way to try and improve it as it goes along. So just a little bit of history. We had the testing trials, 2021, we were involved in one of them in North Devon. Pretty much all we talked about there has almost disappeared. Then we had the 2021, the pilots, 800 farmers actually signed up to that, some of them still continuing. Then 2022, they brought in 2 levels of actions, introductory, intermediate. There were 8 actions within there. It wasn't that enthused. People didn't immediately jump at it because, of course, they were still getting quite a bit of their BPS coming through at that point. So there are about 1,800 farms joined up to that. And, of course, they were then told about 15 months into it, no, we're scrapping that. So we're finishing that, guys. Sorry, you've signed up for 3 years, but no, we're finishing it. Although as those contracts come to an end, there is no loss of funding. Any changes will be made up by DEFRA. So then 2023, 12 months ago, when I stood up here, they brought out 2023 actions. So to change, we got rid of the different levels, and we had 25 basic actions that farmers could sign up to. And through Future Farm Resilience, we came up with a calculator, one spreadsheet that we could plug in on an individual farm and sort of predict what might come out of that. And then, of course, in January, we had the 2024 announcement of what it was going to be, some increases in payment levels on things that perhaps weren't so popular as others. And so we've now got a total of 90 actions that can take place over a 3-year contract. And then we're waiting for the details of those new actions soon. And then, of course, if I put these slides together this week as opposed to last week, I would have thrown up the picture of our current farming minister, Mark Spencer, who just threw out last week that maybe some farmers were taking the mick and they would need to look at capping SFI for certain actions. I think what DEFRA forgot is that farmers have one of these. It's called a calculator. And actually, when they worked out that things like the arable bird food mixture gross margin was markedly better than any risky break crop, why wouldn't they sign up to it? So they're going to have to look at that a bit. I won't predict where that goes. So when 2024 opens up, we'll see the application process between SFI and countryside stewardship come together. It'll be an online application. There'll be no deadlines. You can go into it when you wish, as you can now. You may well end up in 2024, if you've got some CS stuff and some SFI stuff with 2 contracts, eventually they will merge and they will both become the quarterly payment process that SFI has gone. So much better for your cash flow. And then some of those actions will have a 3-year choice or a 5-year choice, and you'll be able to pick and choose what you want there. So, and those are just a list. I'm not going to go through them because, like I said, there's 90 odd different things now. My calculator now is about 13 different tabs with all the stuff that's on there. But those are the things that's coming in. All things that when we think about what we've heard about today and how we might look at moving towards regenerative or moving our farm in a different direction, all those things can support some of the ideas that we've talked about today. So it is a lot more flexible as we go forward. The guidance is loose, shall I? If I say that, somebody said earlier about GS4 versus the herbal lay under SFI. Yes, it's much, much easier under SFI. You'll be able to pick the seed mix that suits your farm best. You'll end up, don't delay if you've not gone in yet. Don't hold back and wait for 2024. Go into 2023 now. You'll be able to add 2024 when it opens up. And the ambition is eventually you'll be able to change things as it goes along. At the minute, it will be at the anniversary of your agreement or possibly a new agreement. And the other point to note is that up to now it's been BPS claimants only, but it will be any landowner will be able to sign up to this from 2024. I thought, well, I can't. Mel insisted that we have to have some pictures, so I can't go through 90, but just look at hedges a minute and just talk about, this is the combination of 2023 plus the 2024 Earth Bank management payment, which you have confirmed, those can be stacked. So our internal hedge, running between 2 fields, has the potential for £68 per 100 metre. You'd be amazed how much this adds up to on farms with a lot of small fields. But of course, you also need to think about, well, put every hedge into it. You need to understand what your hedge might look like. So that one's fine, it can do everything. That one over there, it's mostly earth bank. You need to go back to the old ELS days when the definition of your hedgerow on top of an earth bank was about a metre's worth of bush, basically. So just be aware of what you've got. That one will probably never get there, it's down by the coast. And then every other year trimming, every 3rd year trimming, people go, oh, no, I don't want to do that. One choice you do have is incremental trimming, and there's an example. It's just gone up by 100 mils. That's incremental trimming, okay? So you could do it on an annual basis, but just let it go up and come out a bit. Roadside hedges, worth up to £39 per 100 metres. Let's go back a minute. And just hot off the press this afternoon, or this morning rather, Marianne went to a meeting that DEFRA gave us this morning. If you're in the hedges and your people around you, not your land, but other people, don't even have to be contiguous, but in your area are doing a lot with hedges, there's going to be called a priority payment, which will be a bonus on top of the figures that's already been published. We don't know how much that is yet. We don't get it all at once out of DEFRA. Yeah, so there's an extra as well that could come on that. Sorry, Ross. Yeah, basically, these are the sort of current levels of payment, but coming in the summer through 2024 will be a extra bonus payment on hedges where a landscape, we don't know what size that is, but where neighbours or farms within a vicinity have taken up the same options on hedgerows, there'll be an extra payment on top of what you're getting. And then finally, to sort of flag up, put this slide together I don't know, 2 years ago, I suppose. It was my first sort of guess in terms of, from a business perspective, where how farmers should be thinking about how they use their land when that BPS payment's gone, when you no longer get 90 quid an acre for whatever it is. And basically, think about where your productive capacity is best used and where your environmental actions can be used. And interestingly, yesterday, Matt and some others in the room were at a meeting when we were talking about the local nature recovery strategy in Devon, and we talked about food versus the environment. And actually, there were some real experts there, paid far more than I am, who actually came up with a thing called land sparing versus land sharing in terms of nature versus food. And the conclusion was, blow me down, it's the same as my slide. I thought, this is great. The conclusion was that actually, where you try and spread nature over all the landscape, you actually will reduce the amount of food produced and not over benefit nature. But if you did the land sharing, where you put the productive land into food and the less productive into the nature, you could produce the same amount of food off that land as well as benefiting nature going forward. So that seemed to be, yeah, it fitted my slide that I put together 2 years ago. So, yeah, and that's me. I'll hand you over to Scarlett.
Scarlett. This is Scarlett Buck. She's going to continue and give a perspective from Devon County Council, from managing the business support and innovation team, and work that they've been doing around the Future Farming Resilience Programme. So thank you, Scarlett, for joining us.
Thank you. My name's Scarlett. I work in the business support and innovation team for Devon County Council. And I think it's really important, really, to establish what a local authority is doing within this area. Thank you for the opportunity for having us here today. So I'm actually going to start this by talking a little bit about one of the sections from the Oxford Real Farming Conference, which was very much looking at what local authorities should be doing and are doing or perhaps not doing on a national scale. And a lot of the things that were sort of mentioned within that topic of discussion were the challenges that local authorities have, whether that be finding the funding or geographical boundaries, or for the context of Devon, we're a two-tier system. We've got the county councils and then we have district councils. And all of those challenges are true. However, I think what's quite unique about our team at Devon County Council within the business support and innovation team is we go out to try and find opportunities. And while there are obviously natural barriers to come with that, I think our team is in quite a unique position. So we go out and we bid for external funding based off of the demand that we see from the people that we're talking to. So Stuart's just spoken there about the sustainable farming incentive, and the work that Business Information Point do around that are through the Future Farming Resilience Programme. And that's a really good example where a local authority is doing something unique. The Future Farming Resilience Programme is UK or across the country, but we are the only local authority who are taking a lead on that, which is quite exciting and puts us in a really nice position to really understand the position of the agricultural sector here. Now, as I said, this is the business support and innovation team, so innovation is going to be a real key to what I'm talking about today. So in terms of who am I? My actual title is a project manager. For certain projects, people call me a knowledge exchange manager. But in all honesty, I would really consider myself to be a matchmaker in terms of the innovation sector, and there is absolutely no reason that I'm bringing that up on Valentine's Day, but here we are. Yes, my role within these projects is really connecting people, and my favourite part about my job really is talking to people and hearing about all the innovative things that they do. I'm not a farmer, I'm not a farm advisor, but I do love talking to people and hearing the fantastic work that they're doing. So in terms of what this looks like, we facilitate the Devon Agritech Alliance, and I think this really supports what's going on here today. So we aim to connect farm businesses, tech companies and research organisations to find collaborative opportunities. I think a lady on the front row here somewhere was mentioning earlier about the gaps in understanding research and how research can be quite a complicated thing to deliver. And that's a really valid point, and that's something that the Alliance really tries to support with by understanding what research is going on, and actually hearing what the farmers actually want to be done on farm, what they're looking at, their interests, so that the research can be focused there, but also so that when the research is being communicated back, that it's being heard in the right way and palatable to those who can actually benefit from it. And that works not just in the research element, but the tech development side of things as well. So I'll talk a little bit about a project we've got running in a moment. But actually, as you all know, farmers are naturally incredibly innovative people. You come up with solutions to challenges on farm every single day. And I think a lot of those challenges and solutions that you come up with are scalable and they are replicable. And they should be celebrated and shared. And actually, that's something that the Alliance really wants to support. So how are we doing that? So for any farm businesses here that are in West Devon or South Hams, I'm talking specifically to you right now. Apologies if you're not in those areas, but I will talk about opportunities open to you afterwards. So if you are a farm business in West Devon and South Hams and you've been inspired by some of the fantastic conversations that have been happening today, or you're actually very interested about learning a little bit more on your farm and seeing whether something like that could be applicable to you, whether that be down a decarbonisation route, whether that be a specific project that you want to plan, whether that's looking at your soils, anything really, then this is an opportunity to have really bespoke, intensive support, and then up to £2,000 worth of specialist consultancy. So my role within that will be working with the farm advisor and the farm to find a specialist to come out, whether that's an agronomist, whether that's someone to do soil sampling, somewhere to install sensor technology. It could be anything. It is very open and expressions of interest are live at the moment. If you are not in those areas, something that we are doing a lot of is partnership working. So agri-events is something that we are really, really passionate about, and we are doing quite a lot of. And if you want to hear more about these things and you want to get involved, either come and speak to me afterwards or sign up to the Devon Agritech Alliance, where we do share everything from funding opportunities to events. So just to name a couple of events that we've got coming up, on the 28th of March, we have our data networking evening. So we will have several businesses whom have got really quite innovative ideas that they're prepared to trial, and they want to work with farm businesses, each of which are looking to support various different challenges or solutions on farm, but they're wanting to work with farm businesses directly. And so we're utilising that event to really pull together those ideas and start actually getting those collaboration opportunities to happen. We've also just hosted a Roots to Market event at Piper's Farm, so thank you very much for hosting us there, which was really well attended. And we've got various other events coming up, especially around soils and biodiversity opportunities. In addition to that, the Business Support and Innovation team also facilitate the Devon Food Partnership. This was something else that was really quite important at the Oxford Real Farming Conference. A lot of the speakers were involved in several of the sustainable food partnerships across the UK. and ours has just won the Bronze Award and has now got a food strategy for Devon and several working groups which are all trying to aim for more sustainable food in terms of benefiting both the farms and various different food systems across Devon. In terms of what opportunities are next, again, we've got lots of events coming up and we do have several projects in several areas that are running. But I think what would be a really good part to play on here is our partnership working with lots of companies and initiatives that are already doing fantastic work. So while our job really is matchmaking and supporting that, that wouldn't be possible if a lot of these fantastic initiatives weren't already happening within Devon. So I'm going to put a bit of an open one out there. So some of the bigger things going on, we've got the Southwest Agritech event coming up next month. So if you are very interested in that innovative mindset, that's something quite good to go along to. We are also working in partnership with Tech Southwest to host a farm walk at Agri-Epi's dairy farm to really see some of the innovation going on there and explore some opportunities. And then we also are hosting several opportunities around soils. So if you have heard a lot of the conversations around soils today and you're thinking, well, I'd really like to know some more about my soils, whether that be the biological side or more of a mapping side, then we do have lots of opportunities that we are wanting to explore. So come and have a chat with me afterwards and we can have a look at what that might look like. And just to sort of finish up, really, I think the biggest thing for what we do within our team is we do work with a lot of people, and we do really understand a lot of the great things that are going on within Devon, but we're always wanting to look for more opportunities. Our work within our team is based around finding opportunities, whether that be funding opportunities that we bid for, or whether that be opportunities to co-host events. But that's not possible without understanding what the demand of the actual sector is. So actually hearing it from you, your voices and your experiences is really vital to us. So in terms of joining the Alliance, not only will we be able to share the opportunities we do have, but it's an opportunity for you to tell us what you want from us as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scarlett. Excellent. So everyone's kept to time. Thank you very much. Fantastic. And yeah, really good to hear about the support that's around and all the kind of innovation that's going on, the partnership working and the opportunities for farmers to engage with what you're doing at Devon County. So thanks for that. Before we go to Q&A, I thought I would like to give Wakely an opportunity to say a few words, if you don't mind. You can stay there if you like, or you can stand up, whatever you prefer. But kind of from your perspective, in terms of obviously one of the farms that's been involved in the project in Dorset, but also as the chair of the group. And I'm sure there was a huge amount of work that went on behind the scenes to kind of get the people together to collaborate and to commit to the programme. So would you like to say a few words before we...
Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the honour of being invited to come here and speak to all you people today. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. What Alex didn't say was in his little bit was that this scheme was started a few years ago. The discussion started a few years ago, and we were given a target of 18.1 kilos of leachable N from that day. By setting the scheme up, we've been allowed a glide path, and we had to get to 18.1 kilos of N by 2030. If you're not a member of the scheme, you've got to be at 18.1 today, and you return your form straight to the EA. The EA do the inspecting on all that. If you belong to the group, we have a collective figure that gets sent back to the EA, and all that goes back is a list of the farmer names. No other information than that, other than the collective figure for the whole area. And so that's why we've got quite a good number who've joined the scheme. The whole scheme was agreed with Natural England and EA, in discussions with DEFRA as well. As Alex said, we've had loads of people come and see us, but all this scheme is an approved scheme, and we set up a company to run the whole lot. So everything that gets done has rules to be agreed by, but unfortunately, if they don't like the rules, they change them part way through, and that's what happened last year. I think it was last August, end of August, they came to us and said, thanks for all your figures, you've done your return, because what you've got to remember is the returns we're doing now, they've got to be in by Friday, is for what our yields were last harvest. So we're always working way behind. So they came to us in August, the end of August this year, and said, we think we got the tool wrong. The NLT was measuring things and double accounting, so we're going to alter all your figures. So our figure was, a year ago, 26.2, I think it was, of leachable N. It suddenly went up to 32 because they changed the figures. Not a major figure, but that meant that by this year we had to be much lower again. But bearing in mind it was the end of August, the barn was already had its nitrogen in it, the liquid fertiliser tanks were filled up, the seed corn was ordered, and all that sort of thing, and you just suddenly cannot change things. And the EA were thinking that we could just do things on 1 year. We're saying, as you all know, farming is over an average of many years, so we're pushing for a 3-year average for the figures. What I will say is a positive thing, until we went down this route and started filling in the forms last year, and I'm sure many more of you, and a lot of the farmers in Dorset, had no idea at all in what N they were leaching. We all knew what we were doing, and we thought we were doing a good job, but we were putting more N on than the crops were utilising. So there is some positives that come out of this. So I'll leave it at that for now. Ask any questions, and I might be able to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes now for Q&A. So rather than ask the panel to speak and sum up, I'm going to open the floor to you, all of you, because I'm sure you will have lots of questions. There was quite a lot of content there, different topics. So the floor is yours. So who wants to ask a question first? Thank you, Phil.
Quick question for Stuart. You showed some figures, Stuart, about the sort of... Sorry about that. Quick question for Stuart. You spoke about the numbers of farms around the UK that are signed into SFI. I just wonder what the proportion is of that national amount that's sort of down here in the southwest.
I'm not sure, to be honest, on that, Phil. I'll just say that actually what I forgot to say was the current level is now 10,700. So we do see that growth in farms nationally taking it up. But there's a long way to go, given there's, 80,000 in total. So, there's a long way to go.
Can I just add a comment to that? The government did commit to maintain funding levels to the end of this Parliament, which is about to end. If we don't use this money, ELMS and SFI, they're not going to give it to us next Parliament. It's going to go to the National Health Service or someone else. So if anyone's sitting there on the fence thinking, well, I'm not sure it's quite good enough yet, please do take the money, because we're not going to get it again. We've got to use the pot.
Any follow-up advice on the best way to do that?
That's not my job.
If you'd like some help with that, if you've not taken it up, join Future Farm Resilience if you haven't already. Yes, BIP and Devon County have a contract. There are others as well. So, there is plenty of help out there to help you get to grips with it, so you can sit down for an hour and fill the form in.
And I think, based on experience, often it's things you might be doing already, but you haven't quite realised that there's a grant out there to support what you're doing if you build on what you're doing already. So the farm advisors that are there are extremely good at helping you convert what you're doing already into pounds. So, I'll just add that. I think there's another question near the back.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question about the nitrates project. What is the unit that is, in your case, I guess, surplus of nitrates per year? And what is the value of that unit if it's sellable?
The surplus is anything we've got below 18.1 or the glide path, depending on which year you're working in. This year it's 25.6. So it's below that is tradable. The figure at the moment, we haven't got a figure. It's just trying it. We're just still playing with that. We haven't gone out widely. We can't go out widely this year because the goalpost changed by withdrawing the mitigation offer. So at the moment, there might be a little bit of trading, but it's not going to be major trading like we envisaged on doing. The idea of the trading being if somebody's very low, they can sell it to somebody who's very high and make a bit of money on the side for keeping their farming system low. And if the high one doesn't want to bring it down a bit more, then they can spend some money if it's worth doing. Just going back a bit to the previous question about SFIs and things, from our point of view in the Port Harbour catchment, we're annoyed that the different groups, be it DEFRA or whoever else, don't think ahead and all talk to one another, because these things are marvellous, all these schemes, but if you put in 2-year clover lay with us, what happens when you plough it up in 2 years' time? Your nitrogen level goes sky high. They haven't thought about it. And every time any of these schemes come out from anywhere, they don't interlink. It's a one thing. They just got a one-track mind on what they're doing. And it'd be nice if all these government agencies that come up with these schemes could think about it a bit more. The other problem we have is you've got people that are being paid for overwintered stubbles being penalised because they've got no green cover. And so the nitrogen's gone really high. So we're in negotiations with NE to get those odd fields taken out. But we just don't look at the bigger picture too often, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question down here. Second row.
A question for Charles, really. You talk quite optimistically about the legislative process with the new legislation and getting BNG off the ground and things like that. What steps can we take as farmers and people involved in the communities to try and encourage the implementation of those, which seems to be, to a large extent, designed to give big wins for big estates, but less so for small and medium-sized businesses? What can we do to influence our legislators so that they don't allow the regulators and the civil service to create bureaucratic monsters where the entry level in terms of cost and time is just prohibitive?
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually one of the issues has been, and certainly during the tests and trials phase of SFI, we've seen large enterprises engage. And I just say Powder's not a large enterprise, and I've been doing this off my own bat and trying to get some neighbouring farmers involved because I want to learn how it works. I don't have any structure. It's me on my own, speaking to neighbours, and actually Exeter University have been really helpful, Alex Inman. And one thing I would encourage you to do, well, two things I'd encourage you to do. A, speak to your neighbouring farmers within whatever your catchment is, or whatever your landscape is, and see if you can find some commonality as to what you're doing and what you want to do. And then you may have a sufficient number of you to actually begin to share resources and engage the services of an advisor, for example. And the other thing I think we need to do, and I don't know if Scarlett knows much about this, is we really need to engage with this local nature recovery strategy. The County Council is developing it. I joined a call a couple of weeks ago that was about the marine nature recovery strategy. And my concern, and I certainly made this point when it was being debated in the Environment Bill, is that this is going to be the local authorities, the developers, and the environmental charities, etc., all getting together and just telling us, the land managers, what they want us to do with our land. And it needs to be the other way around. It needs to be us coming to the County Council saying, look, we think we should be doing this, and this is what we can deliver. And so I'd really encourage you, if you can, to engage with that process. I don't know what the outreach is going to be, Scarlett. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but really engage with that process, because what I don't want, what can't happen is us be told again what we're doing with our land. It's us who have to offer that service. And that's the difference, I think. We've got to look at it as us offering things to the wider community, public goods, effectively.
I do think... Oh, it is working. There we go. I'll be totally honest, it's not a programme that I'm working on personally. It's with our natural environment team. So Sarah Jennings is the lead on that for Devon County Council. But I believe Stuart was actually at a meeting yesterday.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, at the end of the meeting yesterday, Exeter University did say they now want to engage with farmers, so it's on their radar.
Great question, thank you. Hope that answers, at least gives some ideas. I mean, also we heard earlier about the nature-friendly farming network. Any forums, farmer forums, networks that are around, I think it's worth engaging in those, because those tend to be connected up with, the policymakers locally, who are then connected up nationally. So yeah, do take up the opportunity when you have. And Rothamsted Research are great at running forums like that as well. So keep an eye out for those. Any final questions before we move over to our last speaker of the day? We've got time for one more. Yes, thank you.
Hello, David Ackland, tenant farmer. It's a question for Charles, really. You talked about biodiversity net gains, and you didn't mention carbon credits, but the same sort of thing. It's a bit of a question about who owns them.
Ask Baroness Rock. It is. So there's some quite interesting structures around it, because obviously carbon in the soil, etc., tends to be sort of retained, and then the management of it tends to be tenanted in the landlord-tenant structure. And the way that some of these habitat banks are being established is there is a job of work to be done in managing the land to maintain the habitat, which is the work of the tenant, and then you negotiate with the landlord, as it were, as to what percentage of the payment you then take. But it all, I think, needs to be negotiated. I'm looking at Chloe over there, who's been doing this amazing job in the Environment Bank, who are the sort of first movers in this space. But there is a way that it can work. What is, I think, the biggest concern and the biggest reason why this may not get sufficiently off the ground is I don't think HMRC has yet determined whether or not the farming of natural capital and the provision of ecosystem services is actual farming for the purposes of agricultural property relief. So, anyone who manages a multi-generational business is going, well, if I adopt all of this biodiversity net gain, carbon credits, etc., am I not being a farmer? And I don't think, someone, the NFU may know, but last time this question was asked in the House of Lords, they just said, we're working on that, which is typical, but it really does block the whole thing up, because if we are not clear as to, if we go into habitat farming or habitat banking, are we giving up farming, and will that have implications for everybody's estate planning? It's a really complicated issue, and unfortunately, I think as one of the folks commented earlier, the two bits of government are not sufficiently joined up yet, but we are trying to make the noise about it.
Okay, anyone in the panel have a final thought that you want to add to that? No? Okay, thank you very much to the panel. Those were great contributions. Really appreciate your time and input. If you're happy to sit there, stay while Matt joins us. So he's the last speaker of this panel, and then we do have one final speaker after Matt to close the day. But yeah, Matt Lobley, Professor at Exeter University and Director of the Centre for Rural Policy Research. He's got to talk about resilience and well-being and mental health, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. So, apologies. I need to lubricate and suck on a sweet because I've just got a horrible cold. I will do my best. So, yeah, okay. You're all demonstrating resilience by staying here right to the end. And I'm really conscious we've had some incredibly informative and entertaining presentations today, and I don't want to end on a bit of a downer, so I'm going to try and turn this around at the end, but I'm going to talk about some difficult stuff to start with, and we need to talk about these things. And many of us in the room will have been touched by these things. And as Alice said earlier, this is actually, a lot of this is joint work with my colleague Rebecca Wheeler, which is why her name's there, but I'm the one who comes out today. The slides that look nice, like this one, Rebecca did them. The slides that just look really boring, they were me. So there's all sorts of background to this. One of the things, though, is these horrendous statistics about suicide in farming, right? I'm sure you're aware of these. In England, more than one farmer a week takes their own life. Now, I'm not going to be talking about suicide. I want to introduce an iceberg analogy to you, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with the iceberg analogy. The bit that sticks up out of the water is the smallest part. It's the bit underneath that you can't see that's huge, and that's often the bit that gets you. So for every farmer that takes their life, there's others who try and don't succeed. My wife used to work on the psychiatric wards at Wanford. She has cut people down who are trying to hang themselves, right? talk about your work having impact. So people trying doesn't always work. For everyone who's tried it, there's other people thinking about it, not acted on it. There's other people depressed and in treatment. There's even more people depressed and not seeking treatment. And then there's a whole load of people that, to be honest, just feel a bit crap about what they're doing and their lives. Maybe not so much in this room, maybe not so much when it comes to regenerative agriculture. And that's something I'm going to say in a minute. So this is the second Venn diagram of the day. If when I was at school I knew Venn diagrams were going to come in handy, I would have paid more attention in maths. And when I say more attention, I mean some attention. But anyway, because I have another Venn diagram I use for talks I do on succession planning. And my point with all this, we had speakers earlier saying how important the business is. It's got to be financially viable. Yes, it does. But the people are the most important part of that. And ultimately, it's all connected. There is a link between mental health and well-being and physical health. And all of that is connected to the health, the performance of the business. Because if you're having a hard time, physically and or mentally, it's going to impact on the business and the way you approach the business and the way you run the business. And this is more important than ever now as we go through this agricultural transition and people are having to make decisions, really important decisions, about their business. So we've done all sorts of work on this, and I'm just going to pick out a few bits just to illustrate some of the findings. And we've used measures that have been validated, right? They're not just questions we've dreamt up. These are questions that have been tested and validated, and we know they measure these things and they're accurate. And we can compare them to the population as a whole. So our evidence shows that over a third of farmers that have taken part in our surveys are possibly or probably depressed at the time of completing the survey. Very few have high levels of positive mental well-being. There's really widespread anxiety. For many it's moderate, for some it's severe. Some are depressed and they've got anxiety. You know, these are not just mutually exclusive. And the thing is, mental health and well-being in large parts of the farming population appear worse than the population as a whole in this country. And some subgroups within farming are doing really badly. Anyone would like to guess a particular subsection within farming that's got, certain people can't guess, because they've heard this recently, but anyone like to guess a subsection of the farming population that's going to be doing particularly poorly in mental health terms? Just shout it out. Shout?
Men.
Men. Who said men? Right. So the dominant narrative, and other people had, interesting suggestions as well. The dominant narrative is often it's blokes. Old blokes, we can't talk about our health. Oh, struggling. Young women, right, aged 24 to 44, come out really badly in terms of levels of mental well-being, high anxiety levels, low self-related health. If we get people to give a score on 1 to 100, they're more likely to feel lonely and isolated and not meet socially with other people at least once a week. And that, excuse me, that last bullet point is really important, because one of the most important buffers for our health and well-being is someone to talk to, is people to interact with socially. And yet, most of the conversation is not about this group of women. And I don't have time to talk about why it might be. Some of you that are involved in farming families will have some pretty good ideas why that is. Holidays and leisure time, right? Wouldn't it be nice to take a holiday? Close to half the farmers we've interviewed don't take a holiday every year. A fifth say they never take a holiday. Now, some people wear this and the long hours they work as like a badge of honour. In fact, I've got a quote in a few minutes, a guy saying, I worked 15 years and only had 5 days off. That's not good for anybody. Around a third that we've talked to hardly ever leave the farm for leisure purposes, don't get a break. I'm not sure if this counts as leisure, but for those of you that are farming, you've been off the farm all day. That's quite good, just get away, get a bit of perspective. And the thing is, the less often people take holidays, the less often they leave the farm, the more likely they have poor well-being. And we've got the evidence to prove this. So we know these things are linked. I'm not saying one causes the other. I'm just saying they're associated with each other. Getting off the farm is going to be good for you. Now, I know it's not easy all the time. This is what some of this stuff looks like. This was a farmer talking to us a few years ago. This is not a local farmer. This was a guy in Derbyshire. He had got to the point where he decided he just had to totally restructure and change his business. So I'm just going to read this out. I don't know what a Derbyshire accent looks like. That's what he had. I'm just going to do my estuary English. Anyway, he says, you know, I can go out on a Friday night now, not have to worry about getting home because I've got to get up for milking at 5:30. Don't know why I was getting up so late for milking. I can lay in bed on a Saturday morning. I can go out with my family on a Sunday. I can watch football and cricket. I can have a day off when I want. I haven't got to get back for milking. Never have to get up to calve a cow in the middle of the night. That's brilliant. I don't stink of sour milk and cow shit. I had 5 days holiday in 15 years. I had 5 days off. Other than that, I was here milking and feeding. He went on to say, and we said, well, what's been the impact of all this? He went on to say, well, you know, the kids have got their dad back. Quite an important well-being dividend for that family. Now, he had to take some really radical approaches to restructuring his business, but it's better than being one of those statistics that I talked about at the beginning. And these are some local farmers filling in a questionnaire for us. Who knows, somebody in this room could have done this. Sorry. So this first one is about the effects of long hours. Not just long hours working on your own. This means being a farmer is physically and mentally exhausting. But it also means it's hard to take a break. So I've just said how important it is to take a break. Due to low income, we can't afford to employ someone. So the working hours are very long, often quite lonely, not having time to get away and meet other people. There is no safety net for making mistakes. And one of the things I haven't got time to talk about is the health and safety record in agriculture, which is all linked into this. These people who are utterly exhausted and knackered and may not feel great about themselves, may have poor self-esteem, they get into accidents. This person here, another one. No quality of life. I work 7 days a week, often in excess of 16 hours a day. I've never had a holiday. So there's something that's not working about the way we are doing farming, and these people are suffering. So we have this question, and I call it a gateway question, right? We just say, tell me what it's like to be a farmer. Tell me what it's like to be a farmer in 2024, in just a few words. And it's a gateway question because it just opens up all this stuff. And so another very sophisticated piece of analysis, another word cloud. So every time we ask this question, we get similar results. We get a majority of people who say it's hard, it's difficult, nobody wants us, nobody likes us, nobody supports us, nobody's interested in us, nobody understands us. They're not happy. That's that huge group are just feeling really bad, feeling really oppressed. Perhaps they're being castigated for their role in supposedly causing climate change, though as we know, it's much more complicated than that. We also always get another group that say, oh, you know, it's really hard, it's really difficult, but it's great. There are wonderful opportunities. They then talk about how they are quite possibly dealing directly with customers, getting that immediate feedback about what they're doing, the quality of their food. Yes, it's hard work, but they feel much better, and they're getting better rewards as well. I'm not saying everybody can do that, but I'm just saying this comes up over and over again. And I suspect some of the people doing regenerative farming fall into that category of saying, you know what, yeah, it's hard work, but I feel a lot better. And I know I'm doing my bit, and I'm improving the environment, and I'm producing good quality food, and I don't have to worry about trying to feed the world. What I'm worrying about is producing some food to feed my customers. And that's the important thing. So very quickly, because one unwritten rule, well, maybe it's a written rule, is you mustn't keep David Thurston waiting, so I'm very keen to make sure he has all his time. Look, there are worrying levels of poor mental health across the farming community. We need to normalise these conversations. So I've come up here, I've been coughing, spluttering, talking about my physical health. It's much more unlikely that I would come up here and say, you know what, I'm really stressed and anxious. One of my students here somewhere, she was saying something to me about coming up here, and I said, you know, my anxiety levels will come up a bit. And I actually like public performance. But obviously, you know, there's always a little bit of anxiety. And we all have stress and we all have anxiety. But when it gets too much to deal with, then it becomes a problem. We need to be able to talk about this. So as I've said, there's something about the way we're doing farming that is bad for the health of many of the people involved. There are happy farmers, definitely. They're mostly arable farmers who take 2 or 3 holidays a year, right? Not kidding. And the thing is, the health of the business is intimately entwined with the health of the family. You've got to get it all right. And so I'm sorry, it's yet another thing we're asking of you, our farmers. We don't just want you to deliver food, environment, and all the other stuff. We want to look after your health. But more than that, the health of the farming community is all of our business. We need you all the time, every day. So it should be everybody's business, the health of the farming community. We do need to somehow try to normalise taking time away from the farm. We need to reduce the social and cultural isolation that many farmers experience. And we need health professionals, in fact, anybody who might walk up that farm drive, literally or figuratively these days, they need to be aware. They may be dealing with somebody who's suffering from high levels of depression and anxiety. And if you're going up there as a regulator, what might that just be doing to that person? And also, we need, as a community, to support each other. So I'm going to finish now, but this is a website we launched a couple of weeks ago called Accidental Counsellors. The idea is there's lots of people in this room who will be talking to farmers, will be seeing things that make you concerned. You may already be providing informal support, but you might not be entirely sure how to provide that support, where to signpost people to, how to have difficult conversations. You'd be scared. Some of the stuff you hear, you might need to unburden yourself because of what it does to you. So this is all about, this is not us trying to take over the kind of farming health space. It's about us providing a resource to direct people to sources of help and support. And ultimately, we would like to deliver some training, some bespoke training packages for people who are involved in farming. So we do know, so like I said, look, it's not been a barrel of laughs, this talk, has it? I must admit. But we do know there are things we can do to help. And like I said, it's in all of our interests, it's all of our responsibility to take that on board and do some of this stuff to help build resilient businesses, economically resilient, environmentally resilient, socially and personally resilient. If you don't get them all right, it ain't resilient. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was really, really important to listen to, and thank you for setting up this resource to help everyone, and everyone help each other. Thank you. Harry.
No. Thanks, Matt. And it emphasises the importance of coming together and talking and being together. So this is great. So, I mean, you could leave the current lot on the stage, but I'd like to ask David Thurston to round the day off. David's been really supportive with setting up this conference, and there's a little sort of, a tiny sort of sliver of a cross-section of the millions of hats that he wears. I mean, he's got a deep relationship with farming in Devon and a wide range of, he's done an enormous range of local and national hats, some of which I've done with him over the last goodness knows how many years, but not least the recent excellent review of the protected areas of Dartmoor. But I'd like to hand over to David just to give a short summing up of today. Thank you.
you'll be relieved to know that I don't intend to say a great deal. We've had a long day, and people have got to get home, and they've got tea and cake at the back and all sorts of things. So I've been asked to summarise today, and the first conclusion I had was that it was impossible to summarise today. So that makes my job a bit easier. Normally, summarising is for conferences you go to where people have been asleep for half the time, and they quite wake up and hear it for the first time when it's being summarised at the end. But no one's been asleep today that I've seen, and I'm quite sure that that's because of the quality of this event, which one of the few conferences I think I can say that has totally exceeded all my expectations. Incredible speakers, good topics, and an audience that are very engaged, which is great to see. 3 years ago or so, a group of us got together with the aim of trying to do something different with the DCAA, the Devon Agricultural Association. And it already runs a great show, the Devon County Show, but we wanted to ask a few questions about agriculture, and particularly, if you like, the future of agriculture in Devon, but also because, like farmers look over their boundaries, we looked over our boundaries too, and we felt maybe that could also help with the wider Southwest. And I want to thank some of the people who were part of that group who are here today. Harry Studham, of course, who you've seen, and Andy Gray, and Andy Neal, who both been participating, James Lee, who's been sitting down here, Lisa Moore, who's been mentioned already, a whole lot of people thinking about what they might do to try and develop that discussion about agriculture and its future. And that has now evolved into some work at the show, a president's symposium or something as part of the county show, which now normally takes place, and also rootstock. And this is the second of the rootstock conferences. I think we all hope that there'll be lots more. And the response to this was absolutely fantastic. Loads of people disappointed that they couldn't get in. We were full. And I'm quite sure that when people hear about what today was like, then they'll be even quicker off the mark next year. Harry thanked the speakers at the start before they performed. Can I just add my thanks to them now that they have performed? And I look at the panel up there now as a representative of them and also the other people who went before them, and thank them for, we've had an incredible demonstration of expertise, of humour, and the way you've engaged with us today has been fantastic. We have been reminded today, I think, of the challenges facing the change in farming that's going on at the moment. I think everybody you talk to says, I've never known anything like the rate of change that we're having to deal with at the moment in every respect. And I think we started off at the very beginning of today by being reminded that the public are now fed a line that livestock is bad for the climate. And yet if the public had been listening to the speakers today and had picked up the complexity of the interaction between livestock and biodiversity and all the things we want to see from our land, and they might understand that critical relationship, and they might better understand how livestock do fit in to the future of agriculture and might change the way they look at it. We were also reminded today of the risk that farmers take in trying to change their systems. Minimum tillage doesn't show results straight away. It's a number of years. And it occurs to me that the way in which our support payments are made are done on a sort of annual basis, and they take count of support for people needing the financial resources annually, but it doesn't take account of people who have to take a risk to change their system. And actually, in the first few years of change, that is more difficult rather than easier. So I think we need to just think about that perhaps a little bit. A third thing which I picked up today was the discussion around the inertia that's created by the structure of business support that there is for serving conventional agriculture. Support is given to farmers, and that's quite right. But what about those people who are in businesses which have traditionally earned their money servicing a conventional form of agriculture? Agronomists paid on commission, salesmen selling sprays, fertilizer, inputs of all sorts, feed salesmen, and so on. Old-fashioned land agents, selecting tenants for landlords who are producing budgets for their prospective farming enterprise based entirely on conventional agriculture. All of these things are wired into a slightly traditional way of approaching agriculture. And we need to think about whether that's right. And if you've got somebody farming on their own, and the only person they see is a feed salesman coming down the farm track every so often, then actually they have a relationship with that person, and that person isn't going to be telling them that they need to be regenerative if that means going down that drive less often. So we need to think a bit more about all of that. Today we've had demonstration that scientists are not an unknown breed. They're actually very normal, quite amusing, I have to say, and that they can engage with the farming audience. And of course, we've seen the best of them today. But actually, the link with science is absolutely key. And with the rise of data and the need to prove what we are doing and to understand it, then that has to be a closer working relationship in the future. And of course, as so often, some of the systems didn't encourage that, and we've heard how research funding until very recently was based on silo working, really, and a lack of encouragement, and that the soil analysis was largely done in the lab rather than out on fields and so on with farmers. I picked up a few quotes that I would just pick out from today. Farmers are in the health industry, and the NHS is in the illness industry. To get flavour into sheep, you need biodiversity. I'm trying to maximise ecosystem functioning. Beetles are the hyena of the insect world. The public don't want to leave a footpath to walk through flowers, but they're happy to walk through crops. Regenerative farming is about introducing complexity. People don't care what they pay to feed their dogs. And getting farmers to engage with someone who's only 32 is difficult. Lots of other good quotes too. I didn't have time for them all. We've heard particularly about the importance of baselining. That's having a baseline record of what you do on your farm. And it's worth recording it now if you're planning to improve it, just to see where you can get it to. I'm quite a fan of building what I call natural capital balance sheets to help that. And it has the added advantage of helping people like Tim, who we heard from earlier, who farmed for 4 years, massively improved the soil and the farm he was on, and then had to walk away from it in the end. Far-sighted landlords now are already compensating tenants if they have raised the baseline environmental performance of the farm that they're renting, so that your outgoing payments can be for environmental improvement just as well as it is for fertilisers and everything which is traditionally wired into an end of tenancy. Finally, we've had an engaged audience here today, and you're here really because you're curious, I suspect. And there are a lot of people who aren't here, of course, and would probably never come to something like this. But as an industry, we do need all to work together if we're going to get this right. Poole Harbour was a really interesting example and a really interesting way in which people came together to face up with a challenge. So please remember that when you get home and engage with others, and even if it means engaging with your neighbour, in some instances you may have to, it would help and probably get us further forward. So have a safe journey home. Thanks very much for coming and enjoy the tea and cake. Thank you.